suggesting was being one of your favourites. So it's almost time for me to head on out of here and hand over to the guys for the Australian Grand Prix over at the Albert Park Circuit in Melbourne. Rosanna Tennant's with us, and Rosanna, I mean, it's a big weekend. Max Verstappen looking to make it 3 out of 3. Lewis Hamilton hoping that he can climb 3, not even in the top 10 on the grid.
Absolutely, Lisa. Yes, Max Verstappen on pole position. He looks pretty confident, but meanwhile, as you say, Lewis Hamilton not even inside the top 10 on the starting grid. He starts from P11 with a lot of work to do. But as you can hear, the music is blaring, the fans are in the grandstand, and we're getting very excited for the Australian Grand Prix.
Fabulous. Well, I'm going to be listening on my way home, Rosanna, so have a great race.
Thank you so much. Yes, welcome to Albert Park Circuit here in Melbourne, Australia. Formula One has travelled down under to find out who will come out on top this afternoon. And it's Max Verstappen on pole position alongside Carlos Sainz. And I'm down here on the grid. My name is Rosanna Tennant. And as you can hear, the music is blaring out. The fans are here in their hundreds of thousands. The organisers here at Albert Park are expecting nearly 450,000 fans to have visited over the course of the weekend. The grid is packed. The cars are on their spots. And the teams and drivers are just putting the finishing touches to things before we get the Australian Grand Prix underway. I'm down here on the starting grid in the commentary box. I'm joined by our lead commentator Harry Benjamin and former F1 mechanic for the McLaren F1 team Mark Priestley. Guys, as you can hear, the engines are revving. People are getting excited. Are you feeling excited about this race this afternoon, Harry Benjamin? Because Max Verstappen's on pole, but it doesn't look like it's going to be an easy lights to flag victory. Do you agree?
I don't think this is going to be a straightforward race, Rosanna. I'm quite excited by this. It's been scrappy all weekend long. We've got so many different factors that are coming into play here. It certainly looks a little bit tighter up the front. It might not be a complete walkover for Verstappen. Ferrari and Carlos Sainz showing good race pace as well and wanting the chance. This might be their best chance to try and beat Max Verstappen. Equally, the midfield is super tight, and strategy, what's that going to throw up? Tyre degradation is going to be key. Safety cars, red flags. There's so much to go in the mix here. I'm excited.
Oh, you're reminiscing about last year's Grand Prix, aren't you? The 2023 race threw up so much controversy, circumstance, all sorts. We had 3 red flags last year. Will we see something similar this afternoon? Carlos Sainz starts alongside Max Verstappen. Of course, he missed the last round in Saudi Arabia with an appendicitis. He's had surgery and he is back on the grid, and he has got straight back to business, starting at the front of the grid, ahead of now Lando Norris in P3 and Charles Leclerc, the other Ferrari, in P4. And that's because Sergio Perez, the other Red Bull Racing driver, was given a 3-place grid drop last night after qualifying for impeding Nico Hülkenberg in the Haas. That has promoted Lando Norris in the McLaren to P3. Your old team, Mark Priestley. So what can McLaren do this afternoon? Do we reckon they've got the race pace to challenge Ferrari and maybe even Max Verstappen?
Well, actually, McLaren in a really strong position, I think. There's a little bit of confidence in the air at McLaren. They have secured their drivers on long-term deals. Their new CEO, or their CEO rather, Zak Brown, extending his own deal. The team looks like it's in a good place right throughout the organisation. In terms of pace, over the course of the practice sessions, they were one of the teams that stood out as having really strong race pace. Their car looking like it handles the tyres on heavy fuel loads really well. A definite, contender for the front rows of this grid as the race develops. They are a genuine challenger to the likes of Ferrari. So could we see a home hero in Oscar Piastri end up on the podium? It's a possibility.
It really is a possibility. McLaren having a lot of confidence coming into this race, Mark, and also off track as well with their team, their CEO, McLaren's Zak Brown, extending his contract. Rosanna caught up with him.
Zak! Firstly, congratulations on the contract extension for yourself. Feels like there's some good stability at the team at the moment.
Yeah, team's in a great place. Culture's fantastic. Everyone's working well together. Cars are good. Drivers are happy. But it's going to be a tough race today, but we're excited.
You've been promoted up the grid because of Sergio Perez's penalty. What can you guys do in race trim? I feel like you are maybe a bit more confident than you might have been.
Our race pace is good. It's a little bit warmer today than it has been. I'm not sure that is something that we prefer. But we got good race pace and starting third and fifth, and we certainly have no intention of going backwards.
And Oscar Piastri obviously has the weight of a nation on his shoulders. How important has it been to protect him from that this weekend so that the pressure doesn't get too much?
Yeah, he's a cool character, so I think it's a little extra motivation. Not that he needs it, but it's hard not to, at your home race, feel the energy, but he's focused.
Good luck today.
Thank you.
McLaren CEO Zak Brown speaking with Rosanna Tennant. And what do you make of the management structure, Mark, at McLaren at the moment? Zak Brown, but also Andrea Stella, the team principal, second year now as team principal, coming from a technical background, being promoted into that role. It seems like they are making good strides, having started this new regulation era on the back foot.
Yeah, I agree. I think the management and the organisation is in a really strong place, not just for today, but for the future. They have had some issues, both last year and this year, not quite hitting the ground running. Things look good this weekend, but actually the team has struggled at the start of seasons. But what they have been able to do is develop their way out of that, and that's a really good position to be in as a Formula One team.
Yeah, lots of stability at McLaren, and Lando Norris is going to be staring at the back of Max Verstappen's Red Bull off the start. Can he get a jump on Max Verstappen and lead into the first turn? Max Verstappen's taken 3 consecutive poles already now in this season, in 2024, a hat-trick of poles, and the margin between Max Verstappen and Carlos Sainz yesterday in qualifying was 0.270, bigger than the margin covering the next 4 cars. Max thought his pole position was a bit unexpected. Let's hear how he's feeling ahead of the Grand Prix.
Well, Max Verstappen, you were the man yesterday, putting it on pole here again. Does this ever get old? They absolutely love you here down under.
Yeah, it's always fantastic to see. You know, the crowd is always amazing. But what I also really enjoy is it's like a full racing program throughout the whole weekend. So, yeah, of course, now I hope that we can have a very exciting race.
For you, you're looking at 10 race victories in a row. Are you motivated by those sort of numbers, or for you is it just business as usual for Max Verstappen?
I mean, of course, it could be another great number, but yeah, we'll just try to do the best we can. I think it's going to be quite a tough battle today. Ferrari seems very strong as well, but yeah, we'll try to do the best we can.
That was Scott McKinnon from Channel 10 asking the questions to Max Verstappen, your pole sitter for the Australian Grand Prix. And he was going to have his rear gunner, Sergio Perez, his teammate, close by, who qualified on the road P3, but picked up a 3-place grid penalty, as I said at the start of the programme, for impeding Nico Hülkenberg in the Haas. And Harry, yesterday, post-qualifying, we were saying the Red Bulls can work together, they're close on the grid. Now Checo Perez will start from P6. Max Verstappen's out there on his own, but does he need Checo Perez? Has he got enough race pace in hand to just motor off into the distance?
Well, based on historic facts, you'd say yes, it's Verstappen, it's Team Verstappen before anything else. But yeah, Perez was supposed to be starting third, was given a 3-place grid penalty after qualifying for impeding the Haas of Nico Hülkenberg. Hülkenberg said it messed up his first lap, but it wasn't too harsh. There's a general consensus perhaps the penalty might have been a bit harsh, but Perez with some overtaking to do. Piastri, Leclerc and Norris now all in front of him, and we can hear from Red Bull team principal and CEO Christian Horner and what he thought on the matter too.
Well, Christian, congratulations on another pole position. I think we were all a little bit surprised. Max even was surprised, but did you know you had it in hand?
I think we were all a bit surprised. The Ferrari had looked so quick all weekend, but I think the team did a great job with Max, just tuning the car, and you know that by the time we got to Q3, we're in good shape, and you know, 2 great laps from him in the end. Shame Checo lost P3, but you know, good to have him up there as well.
And I guess you disagree with that penalty, and you feel that he shouldn't have lost those paces.
Well, my understanding from the meeting was that all parties concerned, including you know, Nico and his team, they're all happy with you know, obviously the circumstance, but a penalty was given. That's the way it is. So you know, we just get on with it.
And let's look ahead to the race then. Max has just walked past us. Is he feeling confident he can hang on to the win today, or is race pace a little bit more of a concern?
Well, I think we saw that again. Ferrari were very strong on longer runs, but you know, nobody's been on the hard tyre yet either. So it's a bit of a voyage of into the unknown. I've
heard from Mercedes it could be even more than 2 stops. What are you reckoning?
It could be anything. I mean, in even the support series, the tyres have looked pretty nasty, the way they're marking up. So let's see.
Good luck today.
Thank you.
Team principal of Red Bull and CEO Christian Horner speaking to Rosanna there. Verstappen starting on pole, Perez now down in 6th after that penalty. But Mark, at least Red Bull have got 2 cars still in the game, unlike Williams, only with Alex Albon. He's starting down in 12th. Logan Sargent withdrawn from the weekend because Albon had this huge crash in practice. They broke the chassis, couldn't use it, so they elected to stand Sargent down so Albon could use his car.
What a bizarre scenario. I imagine people at home listening thinking, what did you just say? Yeah, Alex Albon having the crash, you'd think, okay, well, he misses the weekend, he had the crash. The team have had to take a very difficult decision to try and put their best foot forward, give themselves the very best chance they have of scoring a valuable point, and it will be a hugely valuable point if they can get it. Alex Albon is the guy that's got the best chance of doing that. So harsh though it seems on Logan Sargent, the best team for the decision.
Well, let's hear more about that decision. Rosanna speaking to Williams team principal James Vowles.
James Vowles, what a weekend it has been. I imagine a very difficult one to preside over as team principal.
Very much so. I think this is the hardest decision I've made, not just as a team principal, but in my career. But I'm very proud of how we've pulled together as an organisation. This could have been, to a certain extent, the team pulling itself apart and the 2 drivers fighting, and we've had the opposite. Logan was in with us this morning in the strategy meeting, helping Alex understand how the car was performing on the high fuel work in FP2. And the team did shift work in order to get the car where it is today. So very, very proud of how we've dealt with it.
And then there is, I guess, a little bit of pressure on Alex's shoulders to bring home a point to justify the decision. How's he handling it?
I think, as you would expect, as he went into qualifying, he was on the back foot, and you could see almost that he was just considering things, then started moving forward. Now, this morning, it's the normal Alex you would expect. He's here, and in fact, even more so, he wants to score a point for the team, given the sacrifices that have been made.
And how possible is that point?
I think it's realistic. That car isn't quite in position. We have a little bit more performance than that going forward. Alex, remember, only did 10 laps in FP1, nothing in FP2. FP3 was the wrong condition, so he was on the back foot going to qualifying, and you saw the steps he was making with every lap. I think points are possible. Furthermore, Melbourne, and it's a great thing, this is an unpredictable event, so let's see.
Good luck. What a weekend.
Thank you.
A lot of pressure on Alex Albon now to try and get that point, Rosanna, because for those teams outside the top 5, it's really only 10th place and that 1 point that they can grab onto at the moment.
Yeah, and Alex Albon's going to have his work cut out to get into the top 10, and so is the man in front of him on the grid, Lewis Hamilton. P11 for him in the Mercedes, struggling this weekend to get to grips with the car. Let's see how he goes in race trim. We're getting closer to the Australian Grand Prix now, Harry.
We certainly are. Looking forward to this one. It's time for the Australian Grand Prix. With his 3rd consecutive pole position of the season, it's Max Verstappen and Red Bull who starts at the top of the pack. Carlos Sainz and the Ferrari is alongside him. The first McLaren of Lando Norris is 3rd. Then comes Leclerc, Piastri, the top 5. Perez is 6th in front of Russell, Tsunoda 8th, Stroll 9th, and Alonso in the Aston Martin rounds out the top 10. Then it's Lewis Hamilton in 11th, Alex Albon 12th, Bottas is 13th, ahead of Magnussen in 14th. Ocon rounds out the top 15. Hülkenberg is 16th in front of Gasly, Ricciardo 18th, and from the pit lane, Zhou Guanyu with no Logan Sargent on the grid. Well, formation lap then underway as we get set for 58 laps of this Australian Grand Prix. 3.2 miles, 5.2 kilometres, 14 turns, 5 to the left and 9 to the right. Mark, I generally don't know where this is going to go, this race.
Me neither. Isn't that wonderful? It's one of those circuits that can throw up all sorts that we've already talked about. The walls are very close to the edge of the racetrack. It kind of punishes drivers when they do make a mistake, and as we've seen last year, it can really have things like red flags, safety cars that can completely open up the race for opportunities for people further back.
That's the voice of the former McLaren F1 mechanic Mark Priestley, alongside myself, Harry Benjamin, Rosanna Tennant down in the paddock. Rosanna, the strategy for this one is going to be crucial for the Grand Prix.
Yeah, and it's totally unknown. We don't think we know how many stops they are going to make. We thought it might be 2 stops, but on my way to the grid this afternoon, talking to one of the strategists at Mercedes, they think it could be even more than 2 stops. It's going to be a busy pit lane this afternoon, guys.
Yeah, everybody on the medium compound of tyre, except for Alonso and Hülkenberg. They're on the hards. Hamilton, Ricciardo and Joe starting on the softs, Mark.
Yeah, tyres are going to be a really interesting part of this because no one really has used the hard tyres, so that's a bit of an unknown. And graining, this sort of phase that tyres go through when they lose some performance, is higher than expected. So a lot of unknowns, which I think leaves us open for a great race.
Well, the cars are now pulling up onto the grid, doing their last bits of burnout. Verstappen already lined up in his pole position grid spot as his teammate Sergio Perez slides in to that 6th place spot after his 3-place grid penalty for impeding Nico Hülkenberg. The tensions are starting to rise around the Albert Park circuit, which is absolutely packed out here. The track home to the Australian Grand Prix, this ahead of the 27th Australian Grand Prix held at this circuit. The fans are up on their feet cheering on their home heroes. Oscar Piastri will go from 5th on the grid. Daniel Ricciardo, who worked to do, down in 18th, as Zhou Guanyu will start from the pit lane in his Sauber. It's a green flag at the back of the pack. Sainz on the front row. On pole position, it's Max Verstappen. It's all eyes to the lights. Unfit to the floor as we go racing. It's an even start from the front two. Verstappen gets away. Sainz forced to the outside line. Dust kicked up at the rear of the field. Verstappen through turns 1 and 2. And everybody else nice and tidy. The 2 Alpines at the back jostling for position as we run down to the right-hander of turn 3. The Sainz Ferrari has a little look to the inside of Verstappen, but he's too far ahead on that occasion. Nice clean start in the first couple of corners, Mark.
Unbelievably clean start, particularly for an Australian Grand Prix around Albert Park. No major movement at the front. They've come away in exactly the order, the front 5 at least. Both McLarens getting away well, but still sandwiching that Ferrari of Charles Leclerc. Out front, though, it is Verstappen, and that's exactly what he needed to do. He's got a very fast car. It's up to now Carlos Sainz to really start to work him, close him down, use those 4 DRS zones at the end of this lap when that becomes available, try and find a way past.
Little move going on into the chicane, the quick left-hander of turns 9 and 10 as Russell fighting with Sergio Perez, who's lost a position. Russell in 6th, he's gained a position. Perez down to 7th. They continue the battle into the right-hander of turn 11. Russell still in front of Perez. Perez pounding on the pressure. Further back in the pack, the 2 Alpines and the Haas of Nico Hülkenberg getting rather close. Hülkenberg almost forced out into the gravel runoff area on the exit of turn 11 and just misses out. Ocon 15th, Hülkenberg 16th, but across the line to start lap 2, Verstappen leads Sainz, Norris, Leclerc, Piastri the top 5, Russell, Perez, Stroll, Tsunoda, Hamilton the top 10, Alonso, Bottas, Magnussen, Albon, Ocon the top 15, Hülkenberg, Gasly, Ricciardo and Joe away from the pit lane, 19 and last.
Yeah, so new for this year, DRS available to all of the drivers that are within 1 second of the car in front at the end of the first lap. So of course we're now into lap 2, that means that is available. There are 4 DRS zones around this track, which is desperately trying to promote overtaking, and because everybody's so close together right now, Carlos Sainz well within that 1 second. DRS, the flap on his rear wing opening, dumping a load of that drag, and he's right behind Max Verstappen. Here he goes.
He's coming for him into the chicane, gets it done in the braking zone. Sainz takes the lead at the Australian Grand Prix on lap 2, gets in front of Max Verstappen, lined him up on the DRS straight, made the move into the left-hander of turn 9 and emerged in front. Sainz, who missed the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix, was replaced by Oliver Behrman due to Sainz needing a surgery to get his appendix out, has bounced back in true form. We all thought he was the favourite for pole position yesterday in qualifying. He just missed out, and now as he crosses the line to start lap 3, Sainz leads this race, but Verstappen is still with him. The DRS now in the Dutchman's favour into the braking zone of turn 1. Can't get close enough on that occasion.
I just lost the car. Feeling weird.
Yeah, understood. No problems.
That's Verstappen on the radio. I just lost the car. Really weird. So perhaps Not all too well for Verstappen in that Red Bull, but he's sticking close with Sainz for the time being.
Well, that's been a symptom of this whole weekend, where Max Verstappen not entirely comfortable yet in the car, still finding things, struggling with things like understeer. His brakes have not been perfect for him all weekend. Now complaining of little things like losing the car. The tyres are still coming up to temperature. We're in the very early stages of this lap, of this race, but it's going to be a right old ding-dong, I think, at the front between these two, because right now Verstappen has that DRS. We know how good the Red Bull is in DRS conditions, and he's already hunting down Carlos Sainz to get the lead back again.
Back through the chicane, Verstappen not able to get close enough in that DRS zone. 4 DRS zones, the drag reduction system around this Albert Park track, where the rear wing flap can open if you are within a second of the car in front.
The car is loose.
Max Verstappen again on the radio. The car is loose. He is not comfortable in that Red Bull.
What he means by that is the rear end is loose. He's getting a little bit of oversteer. So when you go into a corner, the rear end a little bit tail happy. It's sliding more than he expects it to, more than he wants it to. Actually, smoke. Is that smoke coming out the back of Max Verstappen's car?
We'll have to get a closer look. It might just have been picked up a little bit of dust. He run offline, and you can really pick up the dust here in Albert Park. We are a temporary street circuit. It's running through a park that is used all year round as a park, not a racetrack. There's lots of foliage, bits of leaves getting blown across, and you're absolutely right though, Mark, that isn't dust. That is smoke coming off the rear end of the Red Bull of Max Verstappen, and it's getting more and more. It's particularly coming on the right rear tyre.
His brakes have overheated. His right rear brakes look like they're on fire, and smoke billowing out of the brake duct, out of the rear wheel, and that is about to let go. That tyre is about to burst, I can tell you that for nothing.
How many times have we said during Max Verstappen's era of dominance that nothing ever seems to happen to him during a race? Never affected by reliability issues, never affected by any kind of track conditions. Verstappen going slow into the right-hander of turn 11. Norris goes through, Leclerc, Piastri through, Russell will be next. Verstappen having to pull out the way and watch the entire field make their way through.
Smoke. Blue smoke. Fire.
That's Verstappen on the radio again, and that smoke is getting worse and worse, and everybody making their way through. Verstappen will have to come into the pits at the end of this lap. It's lap 5 of 58. Carlos Sainz leads with problems for Max Verstappen.
All of the talk so far this year has been, can Max win every single race? Can he take pole? Can he win the whole lot? Well, the answer, I'm pretty sure now, is no, he can't, because that car has got fire billowing out of the rear wheel. I'll be amazed if they're able to fix that. I suspect that's probably his race over, but it's going to take some time. He's now in the pits, pulling back into his pit crew. They'll take the wheel off, but there are flames billowing out of that tyre. I'd say that's it.
Slowly peeling into his grid spot, Rosanna.
Yeah, it's just gone past me down the pit lane, smoke billowing everywhere as the mechanics try to sort out the problem with Max's rear right tyre. Everyone's standing back though as well, because of course it's a little bit dangerous in the pit lane. A lot of the other mechanics from other teams, especially Sauber, taking a good look as he went past down the pit lane. They aren't working on the car at the moment, but wow, the reaction from the crowd when that overtake, first and foremost by Carlos Sainz on Max Verstappen happened, they were ecstatic on their feet, cheering. I think everyone was a little bit of a fan of seeing someone else leading the race. And Max Verstappen is out of the car. He is back in the garage, taking off his hands device and his helmet, and that is game over for the champion.
And that is Max Verstappen's first retirement from a Formula One race since this race, Australia 2022.
Wow. Isn't that amazing? And what it has done is lit up the eyes of everybody else in the top 5 or 6 as we get a shot of Max Verstappen's car where you can see the fire has been raging inside that wheel rim. Now the wheel rim's away, flames still licking up, carbon fibre melted, burnt, crispy like toast. That car's going nowhere. But everybody else, Carlos Sainz now leading the race, both McLarens, even Leclerc brought back into play here. It's now definitely all to play for.
Lots of action going on track, but there's action still in that Red Bull garage, Rosanna.
Yeah, Max Verstappen not happy. A few expletives that I could make out from the screens I'm being shown, and he's tapping his head. So really not a very happy Max Verstappen, as you would imagine. But brakes were an issue for the Red Bull team earlier in the weekend. They were complaining of the brakes not biting. Mark, could this be related to that.
Well, he wasn't happy, you're absolutely right. I have heard him complaining about almost everything on this car over this weekend, but brakes was definitely one of them. I mean, who knows? What often happens around this circuit is brake ducts can get blocks with debris, leaves. It's a park circuit, overhanging with trees, crisp packets and things can get blown on. It's very common. It happens a lot. We've seen it over the years. It could be something like that. It doesn't take much to get in there before the temperature starts building rapidly and things get too hot, and that could be the result.
Carlos Sainz leads the Australian Grand Prix for Ferrari, lap 7 of 58. He's 2 seconds clear of Lando Norris in the McLaren. Then comes Charles Leclerc in the Ferrari third, and Oscar Piastri fourth. George Russell rounds out the top 5, and there is a great battle developing over second place. Leclerc really challenging Norris, and Piastri right there as well. But Sainz head of the field at the moment, and it was a steady start though, Mark, wasn't it, for everybody? Verstappen away well, but then it all came undone.
Well, there were no kind of remarkable starts. Everybody seemed to do a really good start, which meant they all pulled away together. That's been a really interesting side of this. We almost always get some kind of incident at the start of the Australian Grand Prix. It's very tight going into turn 1, but they all got through unscathed, and it was Carlos Sainz that made that move on Max Verstappen under DRS. The moment that rear wing was allowed to open at the end of lap 1, he put it to good use and got in front. He's now lost the only challenge he had in that moment of Max Verstappen, who was coming back. He now sits at the front of field, and it's a McLaren behind him, no longer a Red Bull.
The only non-Red Bull driver to win last season was Carlos Sainz for Ferrari. The man who will be losing his Ferrari seat at the end of the season to Lewis Hamilton, and the man who currently leads the Australian Grand Prix, made that overtake on track, because with Verstappen having these brake issues, and as he was coming into the pit lane, Mark, there was almost an explosion on that right rear.
Well, I'd be amazed if that tyre didn't burst. I think that's probably what that was. We just saw a shot of it. As Lewis Hamilton, he started on the soft tyres, the only man to do so, and already on lap 8, those soft tyres going away, no real surprise. He was hoping for an early safety car, which he didn't get. He's had to come in for an early stop. Yeah,
he's not the only one either. Daniel Ricciardo has been in and put the hard compounder tyre on. So has Alex Albon in the Williams, along with Kevin Magnussen too. So those further down the field getting in a pit stop fairly early doors. Sainz leads, Norris, Leclerc, Piastri, Russell the top 5, Perez, Stroll, Tsunoda, Alonso, Bottas the top 10. But Leclerc in the second Ferrari is hounding Lando Norris for second. Tried to make a move going into the chicane, got oh so close, not close enough, and compromised as a result on the exit. And that's allowed Piastri and the other McLaren to get right on the rear wing of that Ferrari as they make their way through the right-hander of turn 11.
Well, I said at the top of the show that the Ferraris and the McLarens very similarly matched in terms of pace through the practice sessions, and that's exactly what it looks like, because that is what we've got here as a top 4, all pulling away together, as George Russell also called into the pit. So pit stop starting to happen. Interestingly, what we've got here is a circuit where you can traditionally run very, very long on a hard tyre. We've seen people go almost the entire race distance on a hard tyre. This weekend, though, we've seen a lot of graining, this phenomenon where the tyres start to lose performance, much more so than we've seen in the past. The one-stopper seemed like a tall order, but what about if you get a safety car? What about if you get a period where the race is neutralised? Those guys now on the hard tyre, just give them that option of running very, very long, potentially to the end, although that seems like a stretch.
There's about a 60% chance of a safety car, and he's talking about pit stops. More issues for Sauber. Valtteri Bottas, 3 races in a row now has a Sauber pit stop gone awry, particularly with wheel nut issues, and that front left having to wait an age to get put on that Sauber. Bottas drops right to the back of the field. Sauber are only 95% confident in their pit stops coming into this weekend, and that was why. Here's Sainz who leads.
Let's open the gap now then to go long. Tire feels very good to me.
Okay.
So Carlos Sainz wants to put his foot down and make a gap. He's already been told, let's stick with plan A, as Leclerc, his teammate, comes into the pits, followed by Piastri.
Yeah, interesting. So a mix of strategies by the look of it. Carlos Sainz talking about going long. And look, one of the things I'm really impressed with Carlos Sainz is not just his ability behind the wheel. He's put in a really strong showing, not just this weekend, but consistently over the last year. But he's also really confident and driven when it comes to things like strategy. You often see Carlos seeming like he's leading the team's strategy, which is a really strong position for a driver to be in. So Carlos doing everything he needs to do right now.
He is indeed. Rosanna, Leclerc and Piastri in the pits and straight back out again.
Yeah, busy pit lane with those two drivers coming in early. The undercut is supposedly very powerful here, but we've just heard Carlos Sainz saying that he's feeling good on his tyres and wants to go long. So will Charles Leclerc, his teammate, and Oscar Piastri win out, given the undercut is so strong here?
This is turning into a fascinating race as Max Verstappen already out of his overalls, helmet off, cap on, still in the garage, just having a little debrief with some of the teams as he walks out back into the pit lane and crosses the fast lane to go to the pit wall. Verstappen out of this race, retiring due to what looked like very much brake failure on that right rear brake. Up in smoke and flames. And Albert Park, what is it about Melbourne and Albert Park? It always throws up something. Scrappy weekend for all drivers involved. Everyone finding it difficult to find the right balance, running out wide, cutting the grass as Lewis Hamilton has just displayed. He's just had a moment running wide at turn one and having to cut across the grassy runoff area. But Sainz leading. Norris has stayed out in the other McLaren. About 4.5 seconds the gap between the top two. Here is Sainz again.
They're doing a mega job out there.
And that is Ferrari giving Carlos Sainz all the support and motivation he needs.
It is a great circuit. It's an old school circuit. We talked earlier about it bites, it punishes mistakes, but it's also quite a difficult one to categorise because it's kind of street circuit. It's running through the middle of a park, but it's not like that all the way around. It also has gravel traps. It also has grass and some runoff areas. So a real strange mix, but it does tend to give us interesting races with weird stuff going on. Looking at Carlos Sainz, he is doing a phenomenal job right now. He's opted to go long if we take those radio messages that we heard at face value. That's going to be an interesting one because we've all been talking about how graining is more of an issue, how these tyres are degrading faster than we've seen in the past. So whilst others are coming in to make pit stops, getting onto fresh tyres, going for that undercut, Carlos opting to try and push his tyres deep into the race. Now, that's an unknown because no one's run these hard compound tyres for long stints yet this weekend. How is he going to fare? How long are they going to last? He's got good pace and good feeling right now, but how long is that going to be able to continue into this race?
We shall see. It's lap 12 of 58. Leclerc in the Ferrari and Piastri in the McLaren pitted together, fed back out. They're weaving their way through some of the traffic, and those who haven't pitted yet. Leclerc's just got himself up into 5th. Hulkenberg behind him as Piastri now tries to get in front of the German, and Rosanna Tennant down in the paddock. Carlos Sainz has just been told he's got to go to plan B now.
Oh, how many plans are we going to hear from the Italian team this afternoon? Carlos Sainz happy out on track at the moment with the fastest lap. He's liking the tyres, but when I was speaking to the Mercedes team earlier on, they think we're going to see more than 2 stops. So if Carlos is happy now, I wonder how long that happiness is going to last, because this track has been incredibly harsh on the tyres. It's a little bit warmer today than it has been over the course of the weekend, so that might help things. But in the support categories, we saw in F2 the tyres just graining so quickly. So this is a really interesting strategic race now.
It really is, and Pirelli bringing the softest tyres in the range, a change from what we saw last season when we were one step harder. So that is the punchiness of Pirelli's tyre choice that they have brought this weekend that is throwing up some intriguing strategy to play out. It's lap 13 of 58 of the Australian Grand Prix. Carlos Sainz for Ferrari leads ahead of Lando Norris in the McLaren, Perez up in 3rd, then it's Alonso, Leclerc the top 5, Piastri, Hulkenberg, Gasly, Russell, Stroll the top 10. They are your current point scorers. Here's Perez.
I think we overdid it on this tire. The grip is quite low from the rear. Copy.
So that's Perez, and he's currently out there on the medium compound of tyre, so he thinks he's overdone it.
Well, that was always going to be the question. Those starting on the medium tyre, which at the front we've got Sainz, Norris and Perez, the current top 3, that tyre we know isn't going to last that long. We know that it's not going to go very deep into the race, which is potentially why Carlos Sainz is now being told, look, yes, plan A, good plan, we've got a clear track in front of us now, we've got no Max Verstappen, but, you know, the tyres are not going to last. We have seen the medium tyres start to go off way more quickly than, say, the hard tyre would be expected to do. So, but Carlos Sainz, needs to go as deep as he can now because he's missed the opportunity for undercuts or even to cover off those taking the undercut. He now needs to go as deep as he can, make use of the clear track, get onto that hard tyre, which will be the next one that he goes on to, and just see how far he can take that into the race. There's still a huge number of unknowns when it comes to strategy. I don't think anyone's yet got a clear-cut plan, and the fact that Ferrari have already switched from a plan A to a plan B, whatever that might be, has kind of signs of that.
Everybody has pitted, with the exception of the top four at the moment. Sainz, Norris, Perez and Alonso, who started this race down in 10th on the hard compound tyre. He's stayed out, currently worked his way up into 4th, along with Nico Hülkenberg in 7th and Pierre Gasly in 8th, who are having a nice little tussle at the moment over 7th and 8th. Hülkenberg on the hard compound tyre, Gasly on the medium compound tyre. That's the sound you just heard a moment ago of the Frenchman in his Alpine as he makes his way through the right-hander of turn 1, feeds out through the left-hander of turn 2 into the first of the DRS zones, approaches the braking zone for turn 3, one of the main overtaking spots around this track, but the Alpine not close enough. And Gasly, who qualified down in 17th in an Alpine that has been struggling from the beginning of this season. Alpine, and along with Hülkenberg, those teams who are fighting for every scrap they can get, deciding, well, we're going to stay out here and see what happens in this race.
Yeah, and let's not underestimate just how important that battle is for the long-term success, the championship. You know, there's so much at stake. That sort of final points paying position which Haas were able to get last time out with Nico Hülkenberg is so valuable, so important to these teams. It could literally be the difference between tens of millions of pounds by the time we get to the end of this season. So that's a really interesting battle. At the front though, things are starting to shape up. Sergio Perez just been called into the pits for his stop. Here comes the McLaren of Lando Norris into the pits as well. So Carlos Sainz at the front, the only man still on the mediums.
It's a Spaniard 1-2 at the moment. Sainz leads, Alonso gets promoted up into 2nd, Norris in and out fairly swiftly. That was the sound of Sergio Perez's pit stop, and he feeds back out into this race.
A pit stop takes around about 22 seconds here at Albert Park. That's around how much time you're going to lose. Just looking at the gaps between Carlos Sainz and his teammate Charles Leclerc, who's now in 3rd place, there is around 23 seconds. If Carlos comes in now, they are going to be very, very close to each other. Ferrari need to manage that, because the last thing they need is both of their drivers getting into a battle that hurts the overall team performance.
Perez and Hamilton fighting as soon as Perez made his way through turn 1. Hamilton almost going into the back of Perez, who's fed out on cold hard tyres. Hamilton on much warmer up to speed hard compounder tyres, just having to lift off the throttle to avoid bumping the rear end of the Mexican driver in that Red Bull. Perez has held out for now. Perez fell out in 10th spot, Hamilton just behind, and Norris came into the pits as well at the same time as Perez and fell out in 5th place. So that is how it's unfolded at the moment. Sainz and Alonso still yet to pit. Sainz leading this race, Alonso 17.5 seconds back from him. Alonso, who started down in 10th, working his way now up into 2nd. Then it's Leclerc, Piastri in front of Norris, the top 5, Hülkenberg in 6th, along with Gasly in 7th, Russell, Stroll, Perez. Interestingly, Piastri, who pitted in front, has managed to get back in front of Norris now. Here's Hamilton on the radio.
Yeah, okay, copy.
That's Hamilton saying, geez, that car's fast, referring, I imagine, to the Red Bull that is in front of him. They're scrapping for 10th place as it currently stands. Piastri in front of Norris now after the pit stops.
And that is the power of the undercut. Piastri making the stop first, using the value, using the extra performance of those fresh tyres just for a lap or two to put in some blistering set of laps and now catapult himself ahead of his teammate. Great for the home fans. It's an Australian now in 4th place in front of all these Australian fans. From a team at McLaren's point of view, it doesn't really matter, but what they do want to get is both of those cars gradually moving forward. At the moment, we've got Alonso still in the mix. We don't expect him necessarily to stay there. The big question for me is, has Carlos Sainz and Ferrari got this right or wrong? Because they're the only team doing something different. And in fact, here comes Carlos Sainz to cover off those pit stops. Coming into the pits now to ditch the medium tyres. He'll get onto the hards, and then we've got a straight fight on our hands.
Lead of the race pits, and how quick is that stop? Ferrari making their way out. Here's Hamilton.
Yeah, I've had an engine failure.
Oh, okay.
Engine failure.
Hamilton's weekend goes from bad to worst. He coasts that Mercedes, cuts the corner going into the left-hander of turn 9. Engine failure for Lewis Hamilton in what has been one of the tougher weekends for the 7-time world champion. And I think he'll be pleased to see the back of this weekend, Mark.
And not just a tough time for the 7-time world champion, but for Mercedes as well. This has been a real difficult struggle weekend. They're being absolutely outpaced dramatically by their customer team McLaren, and that's Hamilton and Verstappen now out of this race.
This could bring out a safety car or a virtual safety car. Yeah. Hamilton is going to have to peel off. We just saw him peeling off to the right-hand side. There's a little gap in the wall, but it's quite tight. Yellow flag out in sector 3, and this has all happened as the leader of the race, Carlos Sainz, has come into the pits. Fernando Alonso in the Aston Martin has stayed out, and it is a virtual safety car.
Yeah, and that means that Alonso is the big winner out of all this. Hulkenberg also a big winner, yet to stop. Gasly, these guys who gambled on running long at the start in the hope there might be something like this, a virtual safety car which is going to neutralise the race, bring everyone down to a level playing field at slow pace, means they'll lose less time if they come into the pits now than they would have done at full racing speed. This is a big win for those guys, particularly Alonso, who sits at the front of this field.
And we just saw the on-board replay of Lewis Hamilton as he made his way towards, through the DRS zone that takes you down towards turn 9. The engine just giving up on him, and now as his car is wheeled behind the wall, Hamilton walks dejectedly away. Alonso in the pits then, the big winner under a virtual safety car. Pit time loss around about 13 seconds, so massively reduced to what it would normally be when the race is green flag. Not quite as much of a gap as you get when we had the full safety car. And where does Alonso come out? Well, he started this race in 10th, stayed out until the virtual safety car pits, comes out 5th.
And the timing was perfect. It could not have been any better. He was just coming around the end of the lap, managed to get in. The virtual safety car wasn't out for very long. They've got rid of Lewis Hamilton's car. They're already back under green flag conditions, but it came at the perfect time for him. Alonso in and out, just in that tiny gap where they had the race neutralised.
But he just nearly had a bit of a moment going into the right-hander of turn 3, locking up the front right, pushing to try and catch up to Lando Norris, who is ahead of him. It's lap 18 of 58. Carlos Sainz in the Ferrari leads Charles Leclerc in a Ferrari 1-2. Piastri, Norris, Alonso the top 5. Russell, Stroll, Perez, Tsunoda, Albon the top 10. Magnussen, Hulkenberg, Ricciardo, Joe, Gasly the top 15. Bottas, Ocon, the 17 drivers remaining in this race, with Lewis Hamilton retiring along with Max Verstappen. Logan Sargent withdrawn from the weekend. We thought Rosanna Albert Park would throw up something. So far it's delivered.
Oh, Harry, there are some headlines writing themselves at the moment. We've got Sainz coming back from having his appendix taken out. We've got the home hero, Oscar Piastri, currently in a podium position. And we've got Alex Albon, P10, to take a point. The only Williams on the grid because of the chassis issue. It is absolutely brilliant right now. The headlines are writing themselves. I'm sure our BBC Chief F1 writer, Andrew Benson, is wondering which one to go for.
This is going to be very interesting indeed. We've just seen, Mark, a replay of Piastri overtaking Lando Norris as he came out of the pit lane. Norris getting a little bit of a wiggle as he made his way through turn 1.
Yeah, but what we also saw was Lando Norris cutting across the pit lane exit line. Now, earlier in the weekend, Pierre Gasly got a penalty for exactly that. The race director very specifically in his notes says that's illegal. You have to stay within that line all the way to its finish. I don't think Lando Norris just did that, and that could be a problem for him.
Trouble down at Alpine as well, with a lengthy delayed pit stop for Esteban Ocon, and that drops him right to the back of the field. Okay, I think this race is on between Sainz and Leclerc. Less than a second between them. Lap 19 of 58. Piastri, Norris and Alonso now the top 5. Rosanna.
Yeah, and that unplanned early second stop for Esteban, as you say, Esteban Ocon into the pits. That was due to a tear-off, getting stuck in his rear brake duct. Had to be removed by the crew. Could that have been something that happened? And we'll hear from him now.
Did you find anything or not?
Yes, we did. There was a tear off in the duct.
Yeah, Esteban Ocon asking, did you find anything or not? And Rosanna, you called it. It was a tear-off.
I found it. No, I did not. Yes, the pit crew finding that tear-off, and he's back out on the road. A little bit disappointing there for the Alpine driver, who'd actually had not a bad weekend thus far. Yesterday, after qualifying, he was talking about it feeling almost like a victory progressing through into Q2, but now he's got work to do from back of the grid, P17 at the moment for the French driver on that hard tyre.
Yeah, that tear-off that's found its way into the rear brake ducts of the Alpine, I mean, the first thought is, well, could that have happened to Verstappen? Could that be the same thing? We've seen smoke at the back of the Alpine in a similar way, and it could be. But the more I think about the Verstappen incident, it was so early in the race. It happened in lap 3, he retired. It actually happened towards the end of lap 2. I mean, that seems so early that I even wonder if the team might have left something in there in the sort of build of that car, in the preparation of the car. You know, I hope they don't. Of course, these are the very best in the business. It happens very, very rarely, particularly at Red Bull. But it's very strange to have brakes reach those elevated temperatures so early in a Grand Prix for Verstappen.
Well, I'm sure once we hear from Verstappen, we will gain more knowledge. And, of course, we'll be analysing everything from this race in the Checkered Flag podcast, available on BBC Sounds and wherever you get your podcast. But there's still a lot of racing to be done on the third round of the Formula One World Championship. The furthest journey on the F1 calendar sees what was 20 cars initially starting this weekend turn up to Melbourne, the sporting capital of Australia, to race around this semi-permanent street circuit that runs through Albert Park. And it's Carlos Sainz in the Ferrari who currently leads his teammate Charles Leclerc, the gap 1.5 seconds. Piastri and Norris make it a McLaren 3-4. Then it's Alonso, the top 5, who stayed out having started in 10th and benefited from a virtual safety car to swap his hards for a set of mediums. Russell is 6th. Perez is currently chasing Russell, about half a second between them at the moment, in the sole remaining Red Bull in 7th. Stroll, Tsunoda and Albon make up the rest of the top 10. They are your point scorers. Magnussen is ahead of Hülkenberg in 12th. Ricciardo, Joe, Gasly the top 15. Bottas and Ocon, the 17 drivers that remain in this race. But you know what's interesting for me, Mark, at the moment, as Perez closes right in on Russell under DRS. Russell forces him to the outside. Perez swoops round into the left-hander of turn 9, makes the move stick. Perez up into 6th. Russell down into 7th. Can Russell try anything into the run down to the right-hander of turn 11? No, he can't. Perez makes that move and sticks with it. Perez 6th, Russell 7th. What I was going to say before that kicked off, Mark, interestingly how when we talk about Perez having to be that number 2 driver and be there when and if the occasion of Verstappen cannot win a race, he's not there.
No, he needed to be way further up. And I was just looking at that same picture thinking, look, Sergio Perez now in 6th place, having got past Russell. He's got the fastest car. I think we can all agree he's got the fastest car on this grid, particularly when it comes to race trim. Yet he's got in front of him now 2 Ferraris who are very quick, but he's also, the Ferraris have got the protection of 2 McLarens behind them, and they've also got an Alonso in the mix on a slightly alternate strategy. Perez has got a lot of work to do, even though he's got a good race car. If he's going to find his way to the front, it could be too tall an order, and you're absolutely right. Red Bull needs somebody to be there to pick up the pieces on these very rare occasions when something happens to Max, and today Sergio Perez hasn't been able to do that yet. Long way to go still.
Long way to go, and he of course would have started this race in 3rd had it not been for the grid penalty.
Like a rocket ship. Yeah, he felt saw
that. Well, first of all, it was Hamilton saying how quick the Red Bull looked, and Russell, his teammate, just backing that up as well, as Perez, who made the move for 6th 1 lap ago, is now pulling away from Russell, is being left in a bit of no man's land, really. Stroll behind him, a couple of seconds back in the Aston Martin. Then it's Tsunoda and Albon. Tsunoda in the RB in 9th, Albon in the Williams in 10th. And this kind of a race, when you've got 2 big hitters and Hamilton and Verstappen out, is massive for those teams in the midfield and down, outside the top 5, to maybe make millions of euros worth of a difference to their team and their car.
Well, we spent the last couple of days talking about some very difficult decisions being made at Williams with that in mind, and this is exactly the kind of scenario they were kind of hoping for. These are the moments these teams live for. Alex Albon in that sole remaining Williams, having taken his teammate's car after an early crash in the weekend, because that's what the team thought gave them the very best chance of getting a point. Alex Albon currently sitting in P10. We talk about the top 5 teams on a good day having the top 10 places and therefore all the points locked out. Well, one of those absolute shoe-ins for points, Max Verstappen out of this race. Now a Lewis Hamilton out of this race too. This is a wonderful opportunity for Alex Albon to pay all of the hard work that his team have put in over this weekend to get that car built. Pay them back, put some smiles on those faces.
Absolutely. Battle up at the front. It's the 2 Ferraris. There's 2 seconds between them. Sainz is leading Leclerc. Now, I wonder how Ferrari play this and how they manage it. So far, Sainz has been the quicker of the drivers. It seems he's really nailed it in qualifying, and so far in this race, considering coming into this, he was almost downplaying his chances, still not quite 100% after having surgery for appendicitis. How are Ferrari going to manage this? It's going to be crucial for them this race.
I think we can say with some certainty that because Carlos is a little bit lighter now without that appendix, that's the difference between the two. I mean, look, Carlos Sainz doing a really solid job. All weekend doing a really solid job. In fact, as we said earlier, I think for the last 12 months doing a really good job. I think the team, there's nothing the team need to do right now. Both on the similar strategy night, a slight tyre offset, but same strategy effectively on the hard tyre. They can manage the pace. They don't have too much of a threat from the McLarens at the moment. They need to keep an eye on Perez working his way through. But if you're Ferrari, I think you're in a good position. You've got both cars there. You've got a defence behind your leader. You can kind of control the way this race plays out from here on in.
And Ferrari looking at their first 1-2 finish in a Grand Prix since Bahrain 2022.
Oh, you've gone early with that, mate. You've gone early with that one.
Well, that's what they're going to be thinking, and that's what the strategy surely is now. They've got this opportunity to seal the deal. Perez is down in 6th in the other Red Bull. Verstappen out. The two McLarens aren't quite matching them on race pace, but they're comfortably behind in 3rd and 4th. Ferrari have got a real opportunity here to win and get a 1-2 in the 3rd round of what we all thought would be another Max Verstappen dominated championship, and it might well have been had it not been for his brake issues. We're still waiting to hear exactly the reason for his right rear brakes literally exploding as they came into the pit lane, smoke streaming off the back of that Red Bull. But you're right, it is early stages. We're not even halfway through this race yet. Lap 25 of 58. Sainz leads Leclerc, Piastri, Norris, Alonso the top 5, Perez, Russell, Stroll, Tsunoda, Albon the top 10. Hulkenberg in the Haas is now in 11th. They've just been told to swap positions, the two Haas drivers. Hulkenberg now making his way through on Magnussen, and Hulkenberg's on the medium compound tyre, the quicker, softer rubber compared to Magnussen on the hards. Ricciardo is 13th. Joe Gasly the top 15 with Bottas and Ocon the 17 remaining drivers.
Yeah, so team orders at the Haas team, which might be a hard one to take for Kevin Magnussen, given that he gave up and sacrificed his own race last week to give Hulkenberg a point. But you're right, they're on different tyre strategies, so the medium for Hulkenberg a little bit faster. He's not going to be able to go as long into this race before he needs to make another pit stop, so it makes perfect sense to swap them, give him a little bit of a run at Alex Albon, half a second behind Alex Albon for that points paying position right now, so that's a real battle and it's worth going for.
The sun shining down on this Albert Park circuit. Air temperature 21 degrees, track temperature almost 40 degrees, and this is the sound of Nico Hulkenberg in the Haas, and this is exactly why they decided to swap the two Haases. Hulkenberg all over the rear of Alex Albon for the final points paying position. It's 10th place. The Williams makes its way through the right-hander of turn 12 and now approaching the penultimate corner, the left-hander, turn 13. Hulkenberg will have the advantage of DRS as he makes his way round the final right-hand corner. The pit lane entry to your right. Both cars stay out, gearing up to speeds of over 300 kilometres an hour. With DRS, Hulkenberg closes on Albon. Can't get close enough, though, to have a dive down the inside, but he'll get another dose of DRS in the rundown to turn 3. He approaches up towards 300 kilometres once again before he slams on the brake, but Albon still holding on to 10th for the time being. But Haas are smelling another point here. Could be 2 points finishes in a row for Hulkenberg and Haas, but Albon and Williams will be desperate after the weekend they've had, down to one car in this race.
Yeah, and it's a longer game than this, although this is a real intense battle. It's soft tyre, medium tyres rather, only 8 laps old on the Haas of Nico Hulkenberg, 19 lap old hard tyres on the Williams of Alex Albon. There's a real offset here in terms of performance. Nico Hulkenberg needs to make that count now, because he's not going to be able to run as long into this race. There'll be an earlier pit stop for him than there should be for the Williams of Albon. This is one that has to play out now and play out quickly if Nico Hulkenberg is going to take the advantage of having this big tyre offset that he's got.
Yeah, he's able to close up once again through braking as the German driver into the right-hander of turn 12. But Albon just has the advantage for the time being. Let's see what happens when they get back down the main straight with another dose of DRS. Hulkenberg didn't get the best run out of the final corner. He'll get the DRS again, though, and the effect of the toe. But Albon at the moment has enough of an advantage to fend off the Haas. This, one of the closest battles out on track at the moment. moment, indeed the closest battle out on track. The other one being between Perez and Fernando Alonso over the battle for 5th place. Alonso currently has the advantage. Also, Alonso with the tyre advantage too on the medium compounder tyre, Perez on the hard, but also Perez is in a Red Bull with the DRS now approaching the turn 9 chicane. Almost tries to defend it round the outside as Alonso sees it coming, and Perez sweeps through to take that position. Perez up into 5th, Alonso down to 6th.
Yeah, good stuff from Perez. He's working his way forward. Of course, he shouldn't really have needed to be that far back, but that's where he finds himself. He's now got to start picking off teams and drivers. Alonso was a sort of fly in the ointment here, a car that we didn't expect to be that far up, that we don't really imagine has the pace to match any of these top front runners over the long haul, but he was there nonetheless after that virtual safety car that fell fortunate for him earlier in the race. Perez, though, passed him, now has 2 McLarens to get through before he can then potentially get a shot at the 2 Ferraris. And Ferrari, as I said earlier, need to keep an eye on Perez. He is working his way forward. He does have a very fast car. They'll have that in the back of their mind. They've got a little bit of pace in hand. They've certainly got the 2 McLarens as a bit of a buffer, but that may not be the case for too much longer.
That battle between Hülkenberg and Albon has been sorted out because Albon has come into the pits, so Hülkenberg inherits 10th position, and that boosts Magnussen up a place into 11th, along with Ricciardo up to 12th, where Albon's still in the pits, should feed out in front of Valtteri Bottas. Albon coming out around about 15th position, so he's now back out onto the track, and Albon switching on to another set of the hard compound of tyres.
Yeah, so interesting stuff. Ferrari really sitting in the box seat here. They've got 2 cars at the lead of this field. That gives them options when it comes to strategy. Carlos Sainz currently 5 seconds ahead of his teammate. The McLaren of Piastri just under 3 seconds back, with Norris further back from him. So Perez has got a 12-second gap to get to the first of these 2 McLarens, who are running very close to each other. And there is a team order from McLaren to swap the positions of their 2 drivers. That's putting Lando Norris now ahead as he sails past, without any trouble at all, past Piastri. That now means that they think Lando Norris is the faster of the 2. He can perhaps open a gap, or at least chase down the Ferraris. And of course they too, like Ferrari, have got an eye on Perez coming up from behind.
Exactly. Perez is about 12 seconds behind the McLarens. Norris now through on Piastri, who moved to the side and let Norris dive down and take the racing line into the right-hander of turn 3. But what this can do is it releases Norris, who's only 3 seconds behind Leclerc now, but he might be able to bring Piastri along with him using the DRS2 to just give them both a bit of a boost and not leave Piastri too much at risk from a closing Perez. So let's see how that one unfolds. But the gap between the 2 Ferraris has certainly been extending over the last couple of laps. It's now almost 6 seconds between Sainz and Leclerc, and Norris is catching Leclerc already.
Yeah, I mean, look, Piastri was clearly holding Norris up. They were running line astern, and that's going to hurt the car behind's tyres. If Norris has a bit of pace in hand, and a bit on the radio telling his team that was exactly the case, they'll see it in the data as well. By switching those, it gives them an opportunity. Look, already Norris starting to pull away by 3 seconds from Piastri. So that pace already showing itself. They're both on the hard tyre, as are the top 4, all of them. So that means that, Ferrari now have another thing to look out for. No longer is it just a case of the McLarens being a buffer from between them and Perez. They've actually got to watch out here. How much pace and for how long has Norris got in hand here?
Yeah, Piastri's hard tyres are about 5 laps older compared to Norris, but we are now over halfway distance. It's Carlos Sainz who leads this race for Ferrari.
Okay, Lando, I know you are, but we want to try and get up behind the pack.
And that's Lando Norris's radio. He's in 3rd behind Charles Leclerc, being told very much the plan is to try and hunt down that 2nd position. Norris 3rd, Piastri 4th, Perez the top 5, Alonso is 6th in front of Russell, Stroll, Tsunoda and Hülkenberg the top 10. They're your current point scorers. Then in 11th it's Magnussen, Joe 12th, Gasly, Albon, Bottas the top 15. Then comes Esteban Ocon, and Daniel Ricciardo has just come into the pits in his RB and feeds back out 17th and last. There is no Lewis Hamilton after after a suspected engine failure sees him out of this race, and there is no Max Verstappen after his right rear brake duct went up in flames, exploded on his way into the pit lane before he was out safely from that car, and they retired it. The first retirement from Max Verstappen since this race 2 years ago.
And isn't it strange, or rare even these days, that we get two technical failures? We're not talking about crashes here that have taken drivers out of the race. We're talking about two technical errors, two technical failures. Something we used to see all of the time back in the day of Formula One, but we've got used to this era where the teams are so good, the cars are so well prepared, there's longevity in the designs of these things. They have to start looking after engines and gearbox way more than they used to when they would deliver a race and then get thrown in the bin. I mean, this is a sort of strange scenario for Formula One these days, but it has opened up the opportunities for pretty much everybody else in this race. We talk about the top 10 positions being so locked out so consistently. No longer. We've got 2 of those positions already gone, and people now seeing opportunity to really fight for such valuable points.
Yeah, and the gaps, just seeing where the fights are at the moment. Alonso is still very much keeping Perez within his sights. That 0.8 of a second between Perez in 5th and Alonso in 6th. Alonso on the medium compound tyre compared to Perez on the hard. Joe and Gasly also fairly close. That's further down. The Sauber of Joe in 12th, and 0.8 back is the Alpine of Gasly. They're both on the hard compound of tyres, but those are sort of the closest gaps we have at the moment as we get into the middle of the race, and we see how long these tyres last for.
I mean, we'd expect pretty much everybody to still at least make one more pit stop, certainly from the front runners. So this race, we're not going to see this out to the end here. We've still got opportunity. We've still got some unknowns in play. In fact, Alonso almost looks like he's coming back at Perez, doesn't he? Those medium tyres that Alonso's now on, starting to deliver performance, or is it Perez's tyres going off, having had to work his way through the field? The hard tyre, although it's got some life in it, a lot longer life in it, it was a big unknown coming into this race. Nobody had run them throughout this weekend. So is Perez now finding the limit of those tyres, and is that giving opportunity to Alonso? And he's smelling a little bit of an opportunity there.
Lap 32 of 58. Alonso absolutely is coming back at Perez, slowly, just nipping away a couple of tenths at a time, using the DRS as well. He's within a second, so he can open the rear wing, the drag reduction system, which gives you a bit of a boost down the designated zones as long as you are within a second of the car in front of you. And through the right-hander of turn 11, it closes up slightly between Perez and Alonso. Then Perez is able to pull away slightly. This is the battle over 5th and 6th. It's Sainz, though, who has over an 8-second lead to his teammate Charles Leclerc. Then comes Lando Norris, who has been released in front of his teammate Piastri now. It was about 3 seconds the gap a couple of laps ago between Norris and Leclerc. It's now just over 2 seconds. So Norris is certainly trying to hunt down Leclerc. Last lap around, Leclerc did a 1:21.8. Lando Norris did a 1:21.5. So that McLaren is a few tenths faster than the Ferrari in front.
Yeah, it is interesting. We're starting to see a little bit of lull in performance. We might be reaching, we've peaked on some of these tyre performance laps. We're seeing Carlos Sainz pulling out a gap over his teammate Charles Leclerc, so 8.5 seconds now between the two Ferraris. Carlos Sainz seemingly very much under control here. Leclerc also seeming like that threat from McLaren not really developing in the way that we thought it was. Perez really struggling. He's losing performance to Piastri in front of him, and he's got Alonso all over the back. So Perez might have to start thinking about coming in for his pit stop a little bit earlier than planned and do something a little bit different to rescue something from this race.
That's the voice of the former F1 mechanic for McLaren, Mark Priestley, alongside myself, Harry Benjamin. Rosanna Tennant down in the paddock. Let's go to her now for an update.
Yeah, and I've just spoken to Max Verstappen, who was the first driver to retire from this race. He says his brakes were stuck on right from the beginning of the race, and the temperature was just building and building and building, and then finally let go. And I quizzed him as to why we'd seen him in the garage, usually expletive, and then saying stupid, and pointing at his head. And he said he was actually reacting to the fact that the team did a pit stop when he came in, which he said was obviously unnecessary. So that's the reason behind that. A frustrated Max Verstappen, as you can imagine, but it's a long season, and I don't think he's just going to have lost form after this. I'm sure he'll be fighting back when we head to Japan.
No, but you know what? It shows that Red Bull and Max Verstappen are not bulletproof. That is the crux of the matter here. And Verstappen then out of this race along with Lewis Hamilton.
My tyres are not limp. I think we cannot wait too much.
Okay, copy that.
That's Charles Leclerc. My tyre is gone front left. He's on the hard compound of tyres, and the gap between himself and Norris has closed down mightily, Mark.
It really has. It's exactly what I was saying there. That hard tyre after 20 laps, that's about the limit this tyre is able to do. So Leclerc, just in the last lap or two, disappearing in terms of performance. They're about to call him in. McLaren are going to respond with one of their drivers. Norris now all over the back of Leclerc as he rolls into the pit lane. It's going to be Piastri, I think, that comes in if one of the McLarens does. They may well choose to do the opposite of what Ferrari have done, but
they both stayed out.
Yeah,
Mr. Ferrari comes in. Nice quick pit stop for Charles Leclerc. All four wheels off, and then new set back on as he trundles towards the end of the pit lane. But where is he going to feed out? So 2.1 second stop. The Red Bull of Perez is coming up quickly into turn one. It concertinas up. Nearly a collision between the Red Bull and the Ferrari. Fernando Alonso is all over the back of Perez as well. Perez moves to the inside to defend from Alonso and look down the inside of Leclerc. Leclerc holds on much colder tyres. Leclerc now back out there in fourth on the hard compound of tyre. Lives to fight another day as Perez now has to look in his rear mirrors because Fernando Alonso is all over the back of him.
So that might have just about worked out perfectly. And of course, that's not by accident. They calculate these things to absolute perfection. But Leclerc needed to get out ahead of Perez. Otherwise, he'd have been stuck behind this battle. Perez's tyres in a similar situation, going away, losing performance. It's Alonso that smells blood. But now that Leclerc has got out in front of him, Leclerc's now free to chase down those two McLarens who, at some point very soon, will start having the same tyre issue that Leclerc was facing a few moments ago. He's now on a fresher tyre, and he'll hope to use that to close that 15-second gap that he's now got to Piastri and work his way back to the front.
Well, there's a bit of movement down in the Red Bull garage, preparing perhaps to call Sergio Perez in from fifth. Do they do so? He gets the call, box, and peels into the pit lane. Hits the pit limiter down to 80 kilometres an hour and sets his sights on his team, waiting in his grid spots all the way at the end of the pit lane. The furthest one you can go to, closest to the exit. As he hits his marks, the car gets hoisted up by the front jack and he's out again in 2.4 seconds.
I'm a little bit surprised that McLaren, with at least one of their drivers, probably Piastri, didn't do something similar here, didn't match that pit stop, because what they're going to find here is that we've seen how powerful this undercut is. We've now got Leclerc and we've got Sergio Perez on fresh tyres, able to put in a really fast set of laps, and is that going to potentially hurt the likes of Piastri? I think Norris is fine. He's got a 7-second gap over the top of his a 4-second gap over the top of his teammate Piastri. Another pit stop problem is this for Zhou Guanyu?
Well, there's actually no work being done on any of the tyres at the moment. Zhou Guanyu is just stationary. No one's touching the car. There's a fan going into one of the into the right side inlet.
Struggling to select gear, perhaps?
Possibly.
Looked like he was looking down at his steering wheel, but either way, another disaster in the pit lane for the Sauber team, which is the last thing they needed.
Yeah, just nothing. I thought it looked like almost he was stopping for a penalty, but nothing's flashed up on race control. So sounds like, and I'm hearing that Zhou Guanyu for Sauber is now out of this race. So problems down at Sauber. His teammate Valtteri Bottas, after another lengthy pit stop issue for Sauber, is Valtteri Bottas. Zhou not out. He's out on track in 17th. So he has re-emerged then. So still, both Saubers are still in this race, but Zhou now plumb last and at the back of this field. The battle starts to heat up once again, though, further up. It's over 11th this time. It's again, though, between Nico Hülkenberg and Alex Albon. Albon all over the back of him coming out of the turn 9-10 chicane. Hülkenberg fighting everything to try and keep the Thai driver behind. And Albon, here he is on the radio.
They're so dangerous. Moving.
It did look like he moved slightly in the braking zone towards the right hand of turn 11, didn't he, Hülkenberg?
It was right on the edge, wasn't it? I mean, great close racing. It's the kind of thing we do want to see. We don't want this racing to be too sterile where we punish absolutely everything. That was on the limit. Was it over it? I'll leave that one for the stewards to decide, but it was close. And this is a really interesting battle because although it's for 11th right now, there is a point at stake here. Currently it's Tsunoda in the RB sitting in that final points paying position of P10, but Hülkenberg and Alex Albon both want it desperately and are fighting ferociously over it as well.
Yeah, Gasly up in 9th at the moment for Alpine. A little bit out of sync, I think, is Pierre Gasly. Still needs to make another stop, but so far Alpine and Gasly trying to keep within the mix, depending if we get another safety car, possibly a red flag, virtual safety car. Still a lot of unknowns on lap 38 of 58.
Yeah, there are, but what we can now start to see in terms of the picture up front is Leclerc on his new hard tyres to set the fastest lap of the race. He's taken almost 2 seconds out of Oscar Piastri, the McLaren in front of him. He's still got a 13-second gap, but he is closing rapidly on that McLaren, and McLaren, particularly with Piastri, will have to keep an eye on that, because if they make a pit stop now, of course they fall way back down the pack. They fall right behind Leclerc and Alonso. In doing so, they've almost lost the opportunity to respond to the Ferrari pit stop, and that's what I was talking about earlier. It now looks like Leclerc in a reasonably good position, having made that stop earlier, to use that performance and find his way getting closer and closer to the McLarens, eventually getting past them when they make their stops, back into that Ferrari 1-2 situation. I think Carlos Sainz had enough of a gap up front to not have to worry too much about his teammate at this stage, but Ferrari, I think, sitting in a reasonably good position here.
Absolutely. The two Saubers still having issues, and just seeing a little bit of a wheel nut flying off of the front left from Valtteri Bottas's tyre that came off the car. Bottas feeding back out, and the two Saubers now plumb last in 16th and 17th. So that's the look at how the back of the field looks. Lance Stroll also came into the pits last time around, and he's now back out on track in 8th spot, just behind Sergio Perez. This is the sound of Piastri locking up the brakes into the left-hander of turn 13, going onto the grass and having to rally style it back onto the tarmac.
Well, look, Piastri, as you said earlier, has missed that opportunity to kind of mirror what Ferrari were doing. I think that leaves them in very little option now other than to go quite long. In fact, here you go. Because of that lock-up into the last corner, you can see they're struggling, and Piastri now being called into the pits. It feels like it's a little bit too late. They haven't done enough of a tyre offset to really make that count at the end, but I think they've been left with little choice. In comes the McLaren driver.
That 14th of 58, Piastri comes into the pits, the Aussie on home soil, as he brakes and hits the pit limiter. Big lock up and smoke from the front left as he dives into his McLaren grid spot, and the team get to work, and it's a little bit slow on the front left for Piastri, who was looking to try and break the Aussie curse and get onto the podium at the Australian Grand Prix. That podium looks like it will be slipping away from Piastri. He feeds out behind Fernando Alonso in 5th spot, as his teammate Lando Norris, who is now in 2nd, has been called to come into the pits. It's Sainz who leads. 10.2 seconds is the gap between Sainz and Norris as it currently stands. Leclerc 3rd with the fastest lap, having come into the pits for a set of hard compound tyres a couple of laps ago. Alonso 4th, Piastri 5th, Russell, Perez, Stroll, Gasly and Tsunoda still holding on to that final point in 10th.
So as Lando Norris is called into the pits, that's going to leave us with that familiar sight, as it's now become in this Grand Prix at least, with Sainz up front, Leclerc second, a Ferrari 1-2. And if nothing major happens, if no major incident occurs towards the end of this Grand Prix, that is how it should finish. Ferrari are in the box seat here with nothing really challenging them. Both McLarens have kind of found themselves in no man's land in terms of strategy, but perhaps that's just where they are. If McLaren can bring home a 3-4 race finish here, that will go down as a really strong result for them. I don't think they can quite challenge the Ferraris, but with the Red Bull of Verstappen out of the picture, having retired on lap 3, this could be a really strong day for both McLaren and Ferrari.
Norris comes out of the pit lane, Charles Leclerc goes through and up into 2nd. Leclerc 2nd, Norris now 3rd as he makes his way through the left-hander of turn 2. Carlos Sainz leads this race, has a 26-second advantage, and has just been called to come into the pit. So this is working out nicely for Carlos Sainz at the moment, and Ferrari.
Yeah, it really has, and I guess the one glimmer of hope for McLaren fans is that Lando Norris has come out a little bit closer to Charles Leclerc, around 3.8 seconds. He's got a slight tyre offset, a few laps, it's not enormous, but is there any way that Lando Norris can make these fresher tyres count over the next few laps and close up to Leclerc, put him under a little bit of pressure. I'm not sure there's enough of a tyre difference, a tyre offset between the two. And what I mean by that is Leclerc, having stopped a few laps ago, slightly older tyres, will start to lose performance before Norris. On the harder tyre, which is what they're all on, they should easily make it to the end of this Grand Prix, although tyre performance will start to drop off in the last couple of laps. There could be some interest depending on who, and it could be that it falls into the hands of Lando Norris. So in the last closing laps, we saw Leclerc's tyres go out after 20 laps, start to fall away on the hard tyre. We've got around that to go. Could we start to see somebody falling away? Could we start to see Lando Norris just closing in just as he gets towards the checkered flag?
2.6 second stop for Carlos Sainz, who feeds out and retains the lead. Charles Leclerc now in second, the two Ferraris on new hard compound tyres. Norris is third. Piastri's just made a nice move on Fernando Alonso to get himself up into fourth. Alonso now into the pits at the end of that lap to get rid of his current medium compound tyres and stick on a new set of hard compound tyres. Nice quick stop from the Aston Martin pit crew, 2.6 seconds, and Alonso feeds right back out into the fast lane. And this is the sound of Piastri lining up Alonso. It was into the right-hander of turn 11. Alonso defending, and quite aggressively so. Piastri forced to take the wide line into turn 11 and then cut back to have the inside for turn 12. Alonso squeezed it right to the very edge, and in a game of chicken, Oscar Piastri won out.
Yeah, good stuff between the two. Good close racing, really excellent stuff. It's what we like to see. That big tyre offset, of course, making all the difference. And Alonso now forced into the pits to get a fresh set for himself. The person I'm looking at with, I guess, a bit of disappointment really here is Sergio Perez. Hasn't really been able to make enough of a difference. He's still sitting behind George Russell. Sergio in 6th place, having made 2 stops. Russell only made the 1 so far. And we're really expecting more from Sergio in this Grand Prix. It's a circuit where it is not the easiest to overtake, but he definitely can do it. It's got high-speed sections all over the place, and that's what really suits that Red Bull that Sergio's sitting in right now. But he hasn't been able to make enough of an impact for me.
And unfortunately, the man who's been teed up since he came back into Formula One to have a look and possibly take that second seat, Daniel Ricciardo, who's currently racing for RB, has had a bit of an anonymous race. He's down in 13th. He started in 18th after his lap time was deleted in qualifying, but he's been outclassed by his teammate Yuki Tsunoda, who's currently in 9th. Behind Tsunoda is a fierce battle still. Hulkenberg and Albon have been going toe-to-toe, wheel-to-wheel, and almost front wing to rear wing through the chicane.
Actually, it's now Magnussen closing up on the back of Albon. It's Hulkenberg with a couple of seconds gap over Albon, and it's his teammate Magnussen, who we heard him being asked to move over, let his teammate through. It's him that's now got the pace, and the gap is just half a second between Magnussen and Albon in front.
Russell on the radio saying tyres are feeling good. This is the sound, you're absolutely right, of K-Mag, the man who debuted here 10 years ago for McLaren and got onto the podium at the time, the first rookie to do that for McLaren since Lewis Hamilton. Hasn't quite gone the way in terms of more podiums for Kevin Magnussen, but a sterling job in Saudi Arabia, having to sacrifice his race, having already sacrificed it with 2 10-second time penalties, but playing the team game in order to secure Nico Hulkenberg a 10th place finish, and a vital point for those in the bottom end of the constructors. And Magnussen now with the advantage over Alex Albon seems to be carrying more pace than the Thai driver in front in that Williams, the sole remaining Williams. Albon, who had a huge crash in practice on Friday and wrote off the chassis of the car into the right-hander of turn 11. Magnussen late on the brakes down the inside. Albon sees him at the last minute, allows him just enough room. Magnussen deep diving it, didn't quite pay off on that occasion, but he's still right on the rear end of the Williams in front of him. It's a Haas versus a Williams. It's Albon in front, it's Magnussen behind. His teammate is within sight, just coming through turn 1 now is Hulkenberg in 10th. Magnussen will get the DRS. Can't make it work on that occasion. Through the left-hander of turn 2. The next opportunity will be down into the right-hander of turn 3, but he doesn't seem close enough on that occasion.
That was a huge lunge from Magnussen, really, really close. Left front wheel to right rear wheel, as it was by the time they got to the apex, just about keeping away from each other and getting through unscathed. This is a battle that's going to rage and rage over the next couple of laps, because there is a lot at stake. That final points-paying position, even the last 2 points-paying positions, given the rate of attrition we've had toward the within the top 10. Verstappen dropping out on lap 3, Hamilton dropping out with engine failure later on. They are two almost guaranteed point scorers that are now out of this race. There he goes.
Here comes Magnussen round the outside into turn 9 with the aid of DRS, makes the move stick and then gets the effect of DRS again as he boosts his way out of turn 10 and down towards the right-hander of turn 11. Kevin Magnussen secures 11th for Haas in front of Alex Albon. Now 3.3 seconds between Hülkenberg and Magnussen, so this could be perhaps an intriguing battle to watch play out over this last part of the race, whether he can close up to his teammate.
Also, will the team ask him to swap back? Will he repay the favour? Will Hülkenberg repay the favour? He's already said he'll do something along those lines if he had to. Repay the favour to Magnussen, who of course sacrificed his race to allow Hülkenberg to score the point last week. They're now in the reverse situation. As this stays the way it is, it could well be that it's Hülkenberg that moves over to let Magnussen take the place.
It will certainly be a test of teammates' will, won't it? That battle will keep you up to date with how that's going between the two Haas cars, 10th and 11th. Tsunoda at the moment on course to score 2 crucial points for RB as well if he holds on to 9th. It's Sainz who currently leads this race. Only 5 seconds though between himself and Charles Leclerc, but Sainz has just taken the fastest lap of this race, gone a couple of tenths quicker than his teammate Charles Leclerc managed when he had it a few moments ago. Norris is 3rd in front of Piastri, Perez the top 5, then comes George Russell, who's coming into the pits.
Yeah, so into the pits then for the sole remaining Mercedes. Decent stop, 2.5 seconds. Fresh set of tyres on. They've got, just over 12 laps to go in this race. And that now puts Russell back in 7th place. So he's ahead of Stroll. He's sandwiched between 2 Aston Martins. It's Alonso in front of him. Is there anything he can do from there? Around 3 seconds the gap between himself and Alonso. Alonso on much older tyres. This is a real battle that actually gives George Russell some interest in this race. Something to really fight for moving forward. It's not for the race win, it's certainly not for the podium, but it could be for more points. And I think Alonso, who had a slight alternate strategy at the start of this race, it really came in towards him when we had an early virtual safety car. Actually, I wonder if it's going to be really now tight between the Mercedes of Russell and their customer team in Aston Martin.
Yeah, Aston Martin, the last part of qualifying, it really fell a bit flat for them. Stroll 9th, Alonso 10th, Alonso now up into 6th, Stroll also still in this race in 8th as well, so looking good to score some crucial points for Aston Martin. But in that battle, in best of the rest almost, it's McLaren who are doing well. They are 3rd and 4th. Ferrari looking to try and seal the deal here and get a 1-2 finish. 5.4 seconds between Sainz, who leads this race, and Leclerc. Norris, Piastri 3rd and 4th. Perez the top 5. Alonso, Russell, Stroll, Tsunoda, Hülkenberg the top 10. Then comes Magnussen. Albon is 12th. Ricciardo in 13th. Gasly and Bottas the top 15. Joe is 16th. Ocon down in 17th. And the last car currently still in this race with no Lewis Hamilton due to power unit failure, suspected power unit failure. We've yet to hear from him. And Max Verstappen out of this race as well with brake damage to that right rear. No Logan Sargent after he was withdrawn by Williams, so Alex Albon could take his chassis after writing his one off in practice.
Well, towards the front, Lando Norris has just put in the fastest lap of the race. So he's got around a 5-lap tyre offset to the Ferrari of Charles Leclerc in front. They're both on hard tyres, but Lando Norris with a 5-lap younger set of tyres on his car, having stopped later. Leclerc, though, still looking like he's got pace, because responding with a fastest lap of his own a moment later. So this is a real ding-dong between Ferrari and McLaren. I think we all thought Ferrari had a better car overall, but the race pace of that McLaren, the way it treats its tyres and looks after them, generally we've thought has been really good over the course of this weekend. And I think in the closing laps, it's potentially Charles Leclerc's tyres start to fall away. We've got 10 laps to go, around 3.8 seconds between Leclerc and Norris. As I said, Norris really going quickly, fastest lap of the race so far. Could he last that? Could he hang on to that pace when potentially it starts to just fall away for Leclerc, and therefore could the last couple of laps really get interesting between those two?
Yeah, that's a really good point. I wonder if Leclerc is just pushing a little too much, perhaps, because you're right, there's absolutely nothing between his last fastest lap around for Leclerc, 1:19.999, and Lando Norris was a 1:19.971, so a couple of 100,000ths of a second between them. But the gap between Leclerc and Sainz has kind of maintained around about the 5.5 second mark. So that makes me think, is Leclerc pushing a little bit and Sainz is just managing with his tyres? He's out in front, doesn't need to push too much with 10 laps to go.
Yeah, I think that's exactly what's happened. Carlos Sainz is very much under control. Since we've lost Max Verstappen in this race, he's been able to control the pace, he's been able to control his own race. It's Leclerc who's having to worry, having to look in his mirrors. All right, Lando Norris is not underneath the rear wing of that Ferrari, but he needs to be very much aware that we've still got 10 laps to go, and at some point he could be underneath the rear wing. So he's having to look in his mirrors. Carlos Sainz at the moment can just look forward.
Update from the steward's office: 5-second time penalty for Pierre Gasly failing to follow race director's instructions, crossing the line at pit exit. So Gasly hit with a 5-second time penalty. He's currently down in 14th.
Isn't that the second time he's had that exact penalty this weekend?
I think initially he was given a reprimand for it. I think it was a reprimand because it happened in practice, I believe. Yeah. So Gasly down in 14th at the moment. That would, if it finished like this, put him behind Valtteri Bottas in the Sauber, who is a couple of seconds behind him at the moment. That's the update from the steward's office so far, and we can get a Rosanna Tennant update.
Oh, how about that? Yes, we've had two retirements, as I'm sure you have remembered. Max Verstappen out with a brake fire, and Lewis Hamilton out with a PU failure. And he's just been talking to the media in the media pen. And I have to say, I was expecting a frustrated, a cross Lewis Hamilton, but actually, he's in fairly good spirits. He didn't realise that the problem was coming his way. It came out of nowhere. And I did ask him about what this may mean for the rest of the season. Of course, the team's limited on how many engine components they have, but I think they were struggling anyway, so I'm sure it's going to be a tricky season for Mercedes, but he's in okay spirits. You can hear the full interview on the Checkered Flag podcast when Harry Benjamin, Mark Precy and I review the Australian Grand Prix, which I have to say is flying by, guys, and I don't want to curse it, but no red flag, no 2 red flags, no 3 red flags.
No, not yet, but have you just cursed it though? Have you just cursed it, Rosanna? I'm looking forward to our debrief. We're going to have a lot to discuss. This has been an absolutely fascinating race so far. It's Sainz who leads Leclerc, Norris, Piastri, Perez the top 5, Alonso, Russell, Stroll, Tsunoda and Hülkenberg the top 10. They are the current point scorers. Magnussen just outside in 11th, Albon, Ricciardo, Gasly, Bottas the top 15, Joe and Ocon 16th and 17th, the last of the remaining runners with, as we've mentioned, no Hamilton and no Verstappen, and Logan Sargent did not start this race. Russell in 7th at the moment. Just getting an update on his teammate, the other Mercedes car, still in this race, but only 7th for Mercedes. Is about 1.2 seconds back from Fernando Alonso.
Only 7th, but that's where they are. That is where they are. And actually, George Russell really smelling blood with Alonso. In a moment ago, he was actually in DRS range, just outside right now, but it's on the bubble, on the cusp of that magic 1 second behind the car in front that he needs to be able to open that rear wing flap, the drag reduction system, which will dump a bunch of drag, allow him to get around 12 to 15 kilometres an hour extra top speed and hopefully find a way past down one of these many straights here at Albert Park. That's a battle we'll keep an eye on. I've just seen a replay of Pierre Gasly committing that offence of crossing the line at the pit lane exit. He crossed it by miles, and it's an almost exact replica of the offence he committed earlier in the weekend. A very strange thing to do twice.
It's a funny exit almost, because you peel out, and because you're right on the inside of the first corner, which is a bit of a tight right hander when you're coming at it from the pit lane.
I see why you want to do it, but if you've very clearly been sort of noted and reprimanded once already, why do it again?
Well, you can have a word with him then after. You can tell him, ask him why. I'm sure we'll hear from him about all of that. He has been hit with a 5-second time penalty, and actually though he would keep 14th at the moment, but it's 14th, no points up for grabs for that position. Bottas is behind him, 5.3 seconds behind the gap. Joe and Ocon, the last two runners in this race. Let's just keep you up to speed with how a couple of the midfield drivers are doing. Some good results on the cards on lap 52 of 58. Yuki Tsunoda, Mark, has had a really good run, quiet run. We have not really seen much of him, but he qualified in 8th. He's currently in 9th, looking set to secure 2 points. Hulkenberg's behind him, but about 4 seconds back, and he's about 3, he's also about 4 seconds behind Stroll, is Tsunoda. So good quiet race from Tsunoda so far.
Really good, and as we said, the opportunity that's presented itself with Verstappen and Hamilton dropping out of this race means that he's sitting in 9th place. They are valuable points, and look, they've had the hurry up from Red Bull management just as early as last week, as recently as last week, saying that this RB team, the sort of junior, if you like, Red Bull team, they need to be scoring points. Well, there he is. There's the man, Yuki Tsunoda, in a position to score points a day. The reason perhaps we're talking so much about Tsunoda at the moment is partly because we're also talking about his teammate in a negative light. Daniel Ricciardo down in 3rd place after a really disappointing qualifying on the back of a disappointing run. People talking about where do these two drivers go next? Who's the next guy to take a seat at the top table in maybe that main Red Bull team if Perez is to move on at some point? Is it going to be Daniel Ricciardo? That's looking less and less likely. Could it be Tsunoda? These kind of performances are exactly what he needs to do to put himself into that picture and have his name mentioned when it comes to the big seat.
Yeah, both RB drivers were given a bit of the hurry up coming into this weekend by Helmut Marko, the motorsport advisor for Red Bull, who oversees that young driver programme. Helmut Marko very much had expected points from the first 2 races. That hadn't happened. So Tsunoda then making a step forward, which is exactly what Laurent Mekies, the team principal, wanted to see from Tsunoda, this continued step forwards, and he really is leading that team, which has come as a surprise to us. Everyone thought it would be Daniel Ricciardo. He thought we'd wipe the floor with him and make a case for that second Red Bull seat, but so far Ricciardo's home weekend has not ever really kicked off for him. Qualified down in 18th, would have made it through to Q2 had he not exceeded the track limits, which is a driver mistake. But even so, Ricciardo was puzzled because his best lap in Q2 still wouldn't have been on pace with Tsunoda, and that's the crux of the issue here. We'll digress all of that in much more detail in the Checkered Flag podcast, which you can hear post-race on BBC Sounds and wherever you get your podcasts. 5 laps to go of this Australian Grand Prix, which has been intriguing from start to finish. No Max Verstappen having to retire from this race, his first retirement in a Formula One race since Australia 2022. Lewis Hamilton, the other big name out of this race as well. Verstappen started on pole alongside the Ferrari of Carlos Sainz, who has bounced back remarkably from having to sit out of the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix a couple of weeks ago due to having surgery for his appendicitis. Was replaced by Oliver Behrman, who had a absolutely stellar run and really perked the eyeballs of a lot of people in this sport. But what a thing to do for Carlos Sainz to bounce back and on his way to taking his 3rd career win in Formula One. Still got a few more laps though to seal the deal. His teammate is backing him up to make it a Ferrari 1-2, 4.5 seconds between the two Ferraris. Norris and Piastri make it a McLaren 3-4 with Perez in 5th, and the next closest battle is between Fernando Alonso in the Aston Martin, who started down in 10th, and George Russell, who started 7th and is still in 7th, hunting down and trying to find a way through the wily old fox in front. But so far, Alonso holding that position. Yeah,
George Russell with the youngest tyres on the grid right now. Everybody on the hardest compound of tyre, the white wall tyres, but it's Russell who stopped last to fit those, so much younger tyres, and he's now starting to see the benefit of that, where the others are starting to just lose performance around them. Russell now right up underneath the rear wing of Fernando Alonso's Aston Martin. Russell with the benefit of having DRS, where he can drop that drag and gain the extra top speed, and he's got a few more corners before he gets onto the next straight where he might be able to make that count.
Round the final corner, the right-hander of turn 14. Russell will get the DRS. His teammate Lewis Hamilton out of this race. Still in the garage though, headphones on, with a wry smile as he watches his teammate battle it out for 6th place. into turn 1 and 2. Russell still behind. He'll get another dose of DRS in the rundown to turn 3, but not close enough on that occasion. Alonso in the Aston Martin in front of him, the man who won this race back in 2006.
He's doing a good job, Alonso. A really solid defence over the last few laps. And I don't just mean sort of weaving, position his car. I mean actually delivering the right amount of performance at the right time. Now he's finally coming under genuine threat from George Russell. Is he able to make that Aston Martin wide enough to keep the definitely the faster of the two cars, the Mercedes behind him? That's another lap where he's managed to do exactly that. Can he hold on? Even with DRS for the Mercedes, he's putting his position, making his car as wide as he can be and making it very, very difficult for George Russell. At some point, George Russell is going to have to make a big lunge, I think, to make this move happen.
Mercedes power in the back of both of these cars. One the works team, the other the customer. Here's Sainz.
Tires don't feel great now.
So Sainz reporting his tyres don't feel great now. It's lap 56 of 58. He's got 4.5 seconds over his teammate Charles Leclerc as Russell closes in on Alonso into turn 1.
But that's really interesting. Sainz complaining about tyres. He's only done 13 laps on those. His teammate Leclerc has done 20 laps on the same hard compound of tyre behind him, and actually looking like he's delivering more performance. The gap now down to 3.8 between the two Ferraris. 3 seconds further back to a very fast Lando Norris, and closing fastest lap of the race from McLaren. Younger tyres again for Lando Norris. So this is what I was talking about. The last couple of laps, we are going to start to see the tyre offset, the different lifespan of those tyres really coming into play. Leclerc now responding with his own fastest lap. So that's really interesting that somehow Carlos Sainz's tyres seem to be going away a lot quicker than those of his teammate Charles Leclerc, even though they're younger.
Leclerc's just picked up the fastest lap as well. So Sainz here starting to lose a big chunk of time on the penultimate lap to his teammate Charles Leclerc. Sainz only has a little distance to go to try and clinch this one. Meanwhile, Russell down in 7th is still fighting with Fernando Alonso, who's just keeping him at bay for the time being in that battle over 6th and 7th. The two McLarens in 3rd and 4th, Norris ahead of Piastri. Piastri just not having quite the same amount of race pace compared to his teammate. Out in front though, it's still Carlos Sainz, 3.5 seconds the gap between himself and Charles Leclerc, but Leclerc is now catching him, with Sainz reporting on the radio that his tyres don't feel great now.
Yeah, interesting stuff. I still think Carlos has got just over a lap to go now. So all he's got to do is see this out. It shouldn't be a problem for him at all. The biggest point of interest here, I think, is Russell and Alonso, who are all over the back of each other. Oh,
big crash
It's
for George Russell, and he's sideways. The car has been flipped on its side, both wheels, and that's on the exit of turn 6 where Albon had his huge crash. That's going to bring out, and it has done, the virtual safety car. It should really bring out the full safety car. We'll finish this race under yellow flag, slow conditions. Sainz will seal the win.
That might even bring out a red flag, you know. Cars are struggling to get past. His car's landed on its side across the racetrack. This could well be the end of this Grand Prix.
Russell says he's okay on the radio, and that's going to promote Hülkenberg up into 9th, Magnussen up into 10th place as they all try and navigate their way so slowly. The car is pitched up on its side because the front left wheel is underneath the front end of the car. Russell has said he's okay, and it's been speared across the track after running out of the exit of turn 6.
Same place, isn't it, that Alex Albon had his monumental crash in FP1 that wrote off his chassis, destroyed the weekend for that Williams team, particularly for Logan Sargent. It's the same place. That same thing seems to have happened to George Russell. What an end to this race. We are under virtual safety car. This is the final lap. I think Carlos Sainz is going to come round and complete the lap, take the checkered flag, but what a way to finish it.
We should finish this race then under virtual safety car with just a couple of corners left for Carlos Sainz. But Russell then in his pursuit of Fernando Alonso over that 6th place, almost reminiscent.
Tell Charles to come close to me and we celebrate this one together.
Sainz on the radio there, wanting to celebrate as a team. Sainz could have taken pole. He was just pipped by Max Verstappen, but it went Carlos Sainz's way down under as he takes the win for the Australian Grand Prix. Charles Leclerc makes it a Ferrari 1-2, and Lando Norris gets his first podium of the season in third. The Ferrari team celebrates, the elation down at the Scuderia. Carlos Sainz taking his third career win, having bounced back from surgery that missed him for the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix. Absolutely fantastic work from the Ferrari, but a race that is finished under virtual safety car after a big crash for George Russell. Russell out of the car, saying he's okay, and he is now being escorted into the Aston Martin medical car as we end this race in peculiar conditions, and we're just going to see and hear how it happened. So it's on the run down to the right-hander of turn 6, chasing Fernando Alonso, and he just loses the rear, has to go into the gravel, hits the wall, bounces over, and then gets pitched up back onto the track as the wheel, the front left tyre, goes under the front part of the car.
Yeah, so he went in way too deep, had to back out of it, realised he wasn't going to make it past Alonso on the way in, had to back out because he was closing at such a pace to Alonso. That put him onto the gravel. It was an innocuous crash. He slid across the gravel, hit the wall, which took the wheels off, and it was his own front wheel that dug underneath the car, together with the left-hand side, the rear wheel as well, dug under the car and flipped him up on its side. A very strange one, and unfortunately just a driver error.
It's reminiscent of when Pastor Maldonado back in 2012 in the Williams was hunting down Fernando Alonso in the final lap of the race for a big point scoring position and then crashed in that very corner.
Okay, we have it. Yes, we have it. P1, baby, P1. So, baby shark move. Good job, Carlos. This is amazing. Thank you, guys. Thank you. Unbelievable. John. Life is a roller coaster. It is. Life is incredible. Sometimes. Anyway. Thank you, Ricky. Thank you, Ferrari. Forza.
The man who will not be a Ferrari driver this time next year, his final season for the Scuderia. He makes way for Lewis Hamilton. He missed round 2 of this championship in Saudi Arabia due to surgery for appendicitis, and he bounces back down under, qualifies second, takes the win.
And P2. Congratulations, boys. Good job, Charles. Good job. Congrats. Yeah, you did a good job.
And Charles Leclerc makes it a 1-2 for Ferrari. The first time they've scored a 1-2 since Bahrain 2022, as the two Ferraris peel back into the pit lane and absolutely swamped by Ferrari crew as they make their way down into Parc Fermé. Rosanna's down there.
Yeah, and Charles Leclerc has just pulled up in his Ferrari, being beckoned into the Parc Fermé area. Ferrari flag waving, held by the mechanics who are now cheering their man on. Carlos Sainz making his way underneath the podium. It's a little bit special here, as you can hear the Ferrari SF24 firing up there as it heads underneath the podium. From smooth operator and a smooth operation, there is Carlos Sainz, our race winner. Charles Leclerc just hopping onto the weighing scales to be weighed by the FIA, and Lando Norris is now getting out of his McLaren in Parc Fermé as well. He's just putting his steering wheel back in, and then he's going to hop out of his McLaren. Lots of people down here trying to get a glimpse of the top 3. All the photographers snapping away, music blaring, and a lot of the fans you can hear on the other side of the pit straight cheering on their feet. A lot of papaya cheering on McLaren this weekend. Of course, their home hero, Oscar Piastri, here in Melbourne. They would have wanted to see their guy on the podium, but they'll have to settle for his teammate Lando Norris. And Carlos Sainz just getting out of the Ferrari now. I imagine it has been a seriously intense weekend for him, recovering from that appendicitis. He's slow to get out, but when he does, can't wait to see how he celebrates. Gingerly stepping out of the car. I wonder how those 58 laps felt. My goodness me. A fist pump for a mechanic there. And now he's fist pumping the sky. Big cheer here in Melbourne. waves to the mechanics in the crowd, being chased by the cameramen, helmets still on. There are Ferrari flags, Italian flags being waved high, people holding their smartphones up in the air to try and get a picture of what's going on. What a moment for Carlos Sainz, Harry.
Fantastic work from Sainz. There isn't a smile, well, there are smiles to be seen for as long as the eye can see, hugging each and every team member as he makes his way to be weighed.
Well, he's just in his celebration, he's thrown his own gloves into the crowd before he's been weighed, and he can't do that. He's got to get on the scales with all of his kit. I'm sure they'll find them and get them back again, but that's emotion of running away with him.
You can see what it means to him as well as he takes his helmet off. His father, the rally legend Carlos Sainz, embraces his son. And Lando Norris, his good friend, former teammate, straight over to congratulate him and share a hug. And now he makes his way over with the FIA marshals and has delivered his gloves that he threw into the crowd. So well done to that mechanic for making sure there's no post-race drama there. And what a fantastic race that was. It was intrigue. It was not quite what we expected. There was reliability issues. We saw that Red Bull and Max Verstappen are not bulletproof. And in the end, Carlos Sainz, who has shown brilliant pace so far this weekend, was able to benefit. He takes the win in front of Charles Leclerc. Lando Norris third and Oscar Piastri fourth. Sergio Perez in the sole remaining Red Bull only fifth in front of Alonso sixth. Stroll gets seventh, and thanks to George Russell's last lap crash, it's 8th place for Yuki Tsunoda, 9th for Nico Hülkenberg, and 10th for Kevin Magnussen. Crucial points for RB and Haas. Alex Albon and Williams just missing out in 11th. Daniel Ricciardo finished in 12th ahead of Gasly. Bottas, Joe and Esteban Ocon 16th, and last of the finishes with George Russell crashing out on the final lap. Lewis Hamilton 18th, and Lewis Hamilton retiring, and Max Verstappen also retiring. Well, we can hear from the top three drivers, starting with Carlos Sainz with good for Steiner.
Result. I mean, this was Vamos, Carlos. This was Vamos. This was maximum you could get. First of all, how do you feel because of your appendicitis? How you feel? I see you pretty fit, but tell me.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks very much. It was a really good race. I felt really good out there. Of course, a bit stiff, and especially physically. It wasn't the easiest, but I was lucky that I was more or less on my own, and I could manage my pace, manage the tires, manage everything, and it wasn't the toughest races of all. But yeah, very happy, very proud of the team, happy to be in a 1-2 with Charles here. It shows that the hard work pays off, and yeah, life sometimes is crazy, you know. What happened at the beginning of the year, then the podium in Bahrain, then the appendix, the comeback, the win. It's a roller coaster, but I loved it, and yeah, I'm extremely happy.
Yeah, I'm sure it was made easier by leading out there, your appendix, pain, everything. It's just a great feeling. At what pain?
I think I will recommend all the drivers to take it out this winter.
If I would be you, I wouldn't do that, because maybe they can go faster as well. Yeah, but when you were behind Max at the start of the race, did you see that he had a struggle when you overtook him? It didn't seem that he was struggling. He just drove past once he got the DRS. Yeah. So could you see something or not?
I don't know. I felt like I could keep up with him on the first lap and try and take DRS just to make sure that DRS around here is super powerful. Then he lost the car into turn 3, and there was my chance to get close and attempt an overtake. And then as soon as he was behind, I think he started struggling with the brakes, and that was it for him. A pity, because we would have had, I think, a very good fight for P1 today. But, you know, I'm happy to take the win. He's had plenty of them, so yeah, happy to be back here.
Absolutely, you won the race. He didn't lose it, you won it, you know. So at what stage did you know that you are out there to go and win it?
I think from lap 2, when I was leading, I said with the pace I had yesterday, I knew I could get it done. Especially in clean air, manage the tires. I could get it done. Then obviously the risk of safety car and red flag here was always in the back of my mind. But luckily it was a clean race, and not too much happened. Obviously sorry for George there at the end. It looked like a big one. I hope he's okay. and yeah, I could finish the race, win it, bring it home. A great feeling.
I'm sure you go out and party with the Ferrari guys after this 1 and 2. Congratulations again, Carlos.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Congratulations to you as well, Charles. Fantastic second place, podium. 1-2 for Ferrari. Must feel great for the whole team, and you must be proud of what you achieved today.
Yeah, it feels good mostly for the team, of course. I mean, first and second didn't happen since Bahrain 2022, which are very good memories we have, and it's amazing to be able that we can do that. Carlos has had an incredible weekend to come back after his surgery. He's done an amazing race. On my side, I struggled a bit more in the second stint with the first hard. There, I don't know, I didn't manage the tyres well, but then the last stint was more positive. But first and second was the best we could do.
I saw, did you at any stage think you can attack Carlos, or was it always pretty sure that you cannot get to him, but you could hold off the McLarens? At any stage, did you feel that you can attack Carlos, or was he too far ahead?
Not really, because in the first stint we had to protect behind, so we had to stop a bit earlier, and then from that moment onwards Carlos was very fast, and with my tires I was struggling. So I think that as soon as we stopped at the first stop, then for me it was clear. But again, Carlos has done a better job all weekend, so I mean, at least from qualifying to the race, and he definitely deserves that victory. So I'm really happy for him, I'm really happy for the team. It's really good points. We came into the weekend telling ourselves that we need to maximize our points, and there's nothing we could have done better, so really happy about this.
I wish you a nice evening partying with the boys. I wish you a good evening partying with the boys.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Good job, Lando. Congratulations to the podium. Must feel good, huh? Must feel good to be the second force this weekend as a team, you know, and especially for the team, it's great. So out there at any stage, did you think you can get to 2?
No, it was a very good day for us. I'm very happy, proud of the team. P3 and P4 is a lot of points in the championship, so that's the first thing. We missed out on Charles. I think our pace was a little bit better. He undercut us in the first stint, so maybe a little bit of hope for second place. I think our pace was strong enough today. But Ferrari and Carlos did a very good job, so hats off to them. They've been fast all weekend, and I felt good. I felt like I could manage the tyres very well today, and that was a good step. Probably wasn't expecting to be on the podium, so I'm very happy.
I was expecting you on the podium, you know. I said that McLaren will be on the podium, you know. So, but you must be confident now for the team going forward to be in a good position, always to fight for podiums.
Yes, I mean it's clear that this circuit suits us a little bit more. So we've been able to push and unlocked a little bit of speed. But it's still another step to Ferrari and to Red Bull. They're 1 or 2 steps ahead of us still, so we need to catch up. But it's clear that we're getting closer, and a day like today proves exactly that. So a big thanks to all in McLaren. Yeah, we're getting closer to our target. It's nice to be back on the podium again, and hopefully we can have many more.
Yeah, I'm sure also for Oscar finishing 4th for Melbourne is fantastic as a team effort. Very well done, guys. Congratulations.
Cheers. Thank you, man.
The top 3 there for the Australian Grand Prix. Your winner, Carlos Sainz, Charles Leclerc in 2nd, and Lando Norris in 3rd. Talking to Gunther Steiner. I think that'll be a very happy podium, Rosanna, particularly with the man on the top step. What a story.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been an incredible recovery from Carlos Sainz. If we think back to the Saturday, of course, because we raced on a Saturday in Saudi Arabia last time out, and Carlos Sainz gingerly walking into the paddock having had surgery on that appendicitis. What a difference the last couple of weeks have made, and now he's going to be on the top step of the podium. And a Ferrari 1-2. I mean, guys, when we came into this weekend, we knew that their team principal, Fred Vasseur, thought that they would be front runners this weekend. Did you have them down as a 1-2, though?
Oh, come on, did anybody?
I think I'm pretty sure my predictions were Sainz, Leclerc and Norris from memory.
I mean, look,
well, dinner's on you.
The one thing I would say about today's result is, and we'll never know the answer, whether Max Verstappen, whether Carlos could have taken on Max in a straight fight. He did an amazing job to get ahead at the start. He did exactly what he needed to do. The moment he got DRS at the end of lap 1, he put it to great use. We don't know if there was an element on Max's car that was slowing him down with that brake problem that he had, and maybe that was part of it. Who knows? But look, what we have seen is a really strong Carlos, not just today, but all weekend, and even, as I said in commentary, a long way before that. He is on a real mission right now. He's obviously looking for a new seat, and each of these performances, the way he's conducting himself, it's putting him in a wonderful position. And if I'm one of the other top teams, if I'm Mercedes, we're losing Lewis Hamilton at the end of the season, I'm looking at Carlos thinking, this is actually a really, really strong option.
Yeah, Carlos has performed beautifully over the course of this weekend, saying that he was reasonably comfortable in the car at the end of practice on Friday. I'm sure he's feeling a lot more comfortable now that those 58 laps are over. And I think the drivers are now heading into the cool-down room. Carlos Sainz was walking around Parc Fermé with a Spanish flag. Let's listen in.
Maybe the rear brakes were already going. Then he was on my DRS. I was seeing that, I was like, we continued like 2-3 laps. Yeah, I was like, come on. Really bad. Oh, whoa. I was on fire, huh? The rear brakes. You exploded. Yeah.
So in the cool down room, the top 3, and they're being shown images of Verstappen and his issues that saw him out of the race with that brake fire and then turning into an explosion. Carlos Sainz reacting quite well to that. Big surprise for him.
I like it. I think they just the shape of the corner is amazing. It's so nice. It's so narrow. Yeah. At the speed we go. This is it.
And now they're watching the Russell crash.
No, that's not the one. Yes. Yeah. But how did he? The rear tire. It looked like he rolled. Oh, it's okay. I thought it was much.
They're saying it wasn't too bad.
Well, they're laughing because the end position that George Russell's car finished in looks like the biggest crash you've ever seen. It's on its side, stuck in the middle of the racetrack. But actually, it was quite innocuous building up to that. It was only the fact that it was sliding across the track and the tyres dug in underneath it that flipped it over. How interesting, though, to see. We often call that moment, the cool-down room, the Max Verstappen podcast, don't we? Where we hear them all chatting. It's the first time for ages that Max hasn't been in it.
Well, at the end of all that, Rosanna, though, Sainz and Verstappen continue to be the only race winners in the last 11 months.
I know, amazing stats, isn't it? Here we go then, Lando Norris out onto the podium, giving a thumbs up to the crowd and waving to the fans in the grandstand. He's going to take his place on the 3rd step of the podium. And now second up on the podium comes Charles Leclerc, second written on the back screen with a picture of Charles Leclerc as well and his race number 16. He's standing on the podium now, and here we go. Carlos Sainz, big cheer for Carlos Sainz.
Scuderia Ferrari, the Spanish and Italian national anthems.
So Carlos Sainz takes his cap off, and here we go.
Well, it's now time to hear the celebrations for Carlos Sainz, the Spanish national anthem. Spanish and Italian national anthems playing out for Carlos Sainz of Spain and, of course, Ferrari of Italy. And you couldn't really hear the actual soundtrack over the crew and the mechanics and all those in Ferrari raising their voices to sing it loud. And the passion they have is outstanding, Rosanna. There's a smile in everyone's face in that crowd.
There really is, and Carlos Sainz has the biggest smile of all. He's just held the trophy up towards the mechanics, obviously thanking them for all their efforts as well to help him achieve this win. And the beautiful trophy for the Australian Grand Prix, it's a reflective steering wheel shaped trophy, and you can just see all the people below the podium reflected in the trophy. The Constructors' Trophy has just been handed over as well, so more cheers and more rounds of applause. Charles Leclerc is now going to take his trophy as well, a slightly smaller version of the winner's trophy, as you might imagine. He holds it aloft and has a little look at the trophy itself, turning it over, examining it closely. And here we go, you can probably hear in the background Lando Norris holding the trophy, gives it a slow rise up above his head, and again also having a little look at the trophy. I love how the drivers examine them. Charles Leclerc is looking a little over-eager. He's grabbed his bottle of sparkling wine. Here we go, confetti in the air, champagne being sprayed all over, and Carlos Sainz steps down off the top step to give Lando Norris a good spraying. The drivers are enjoying themselves. I have to say the conditions here are absolutely spectacular, Harry. Blue skies, a slight breeze, and as I look to my right, there are Italian flags flying, Ferrari flags flying, and the green and yellow confetti is flying in the air. What a moment for Carlos Sainz. What a lovely story. Third race of the season, and it's not all about Max Verstappen. How about that?
Who'd have thought it? We haven't heard the Dutch national anthem. I can't believe that. The routine is off. I mean, fantastic. And in the driver's standings as well, Leclerc now goes up into second, Sainz up into fourth, and Norris gets up into sixth just behind his teammate Piastri. Ferrari as well, only 4 points behind Red Bull in the constructors. So this is a big race for a lot of those teams behind Red Bull. We're going to talk about this for a while. Looking forward to digesting it all.
Absolutely. The Checkered Flag podcast is going to be a really juicy one. The drivers are just gathering together for a photo on the podium, and I have to say, as I turn around and look at the stand behind me, it's just filled with photographers all training their lenses on these three drivers, and of course one of the Ferrari representatives as well up there collecting the trophy. And as I look over the start-finish straight, the fans are still absolutely glued to the action, and they have been all weekend long. It has been so busy here at Albert Park Circuit, and I think this race is for the fans, isn't it? Because I think secretly everyone's enjoying the fact that there wasn't a Max Verstappen on the top step of the podium. And I know that sounds a bit mean, but I think this was a good day for Formula One.
It's been a really interesting day for Formula One. I mean, not if you're a Max Verstappen fan, clearly, or Max Verstappen himself. But yeah, you're right. It's been, I don't want to use the word monotonous because I don't want to take anything away from the success that Max Verstappen and Red Bull have achieved in recent times. But I think if you're watching this sport, it is nice to see opportunity presented to others, and look, it was Carlos Sainz that took it today. What I take from the scenes that we're seeing unfolding here, the emotion pouring out of Carlos Sainz, that lovely message on his cool down lap to his team, the emotion from the team, the mechanics and engineers. This is a Ferrari, and I don't want to get too carried away after one result, but I think in recent times Ferrari are building. They're building back towards success. They're getting close. They've got Fred Vasseur now leading the team, which I think heralds a sort of new era for the team. Lewis Hamilton coming at the end of this season. There is hope at Ferrari, and I think it's been a few years really since we've seen hope. That's a great story.
Well, I tell you what, Mark, when I interviewed Lewis Hamilton in the media pen just a short while ago, it was when there was a Ferrari 1-2. Obviously, that flicked and changed a little bit, but at that point, the 1-2 was there on the timing sheets. And I said to Lewis, 2025 is looking pretty good, isn't it? And I wish it had been television at that point, because the look on his face, he gave me a nod. He knows he's heading in the right direction come next season. I'm sure he'll wish he was wearing red this afternoon as well.
Absolutely, an inspired choice for Lewis Hamilton once again on the cusp of a new regulation change. He makes one of the biggest driver moves that we've seen in a long time. The last one was Lewis Hamilton when he moved from Mercedes, probably from McLaren to Mercedes ahead of the new hybrid era. But yeah, a bit of a weekend to forget for Mercedes. No points for them either in the Australian Grand Prix with that big crash for Russell. And actually the last time, well, Carlos Sainz won Singapore, didn't he, last year, and in that race on the last lap, who put it in the wall? It was George Russell.
It's very true, isn't it? I mean, look, I'm a big fan of George Russell. I think he's an excellent driver, so talented, really mature for the level of experience that he has. I think someone who can absolutely lead that Mercedes team forward once Lewis moves on. But there's this tiny part of his character where he does make mistakes, and we've seen a few of them. And if you compare him to the likes of Max Verstappen, I can't remember the last time we saw Max Verstappen make a genuine driver error that cost something big in a race. I genuinely can't remember the last time that happened. Maybe that's the difference between an outright champion that Max is and someone who, in George Russell, still a little bit of a way to go before he reaches that absolute top echelons of the sport, perhaps.
Yeah, Oscar Piastri for McLaren gave the home crowd something to smile about, just off the podium in fourth. But Sergio Perez, fifth in the sole remaining Red Bull. Now, that is a bigger story than I think we've really made it out on the race coverage. Because with his seat under pressure, perhaps both Red Bull drivers might end up leaving at some stage. Who knows? He didn't deliver when Verstappen was not able to go for the win. Yeah,
what we said earlier in the weekend was that Red Bull are in a luxurious position where they can afford a Sergio Perez he's finished second in the first two races, but he was a long way behind his teammate. But that doesn't matter too much. They can afford that as long as he's there, whether he's 20 seconds behind Max or not. As long as he picks up the second places, that's what they need. Today Max wasn't there, and nor was Sergio Perez. Disappointing for me. I know he had an issue in qualifying. He received a 3-place grid penalty, but even despite that, he only qualified, some way off his teammate. And then in the race, he was anonymous. He had a fast car, a very fast car in that Red Bull. Didn't seem to be able to put it to use and was sort of in no man's land for most of the Grand Prix.
And this was a chance for him to take the championship lead, wasn't it? I mean, just a very disappointing circumstance Sergio Perez finds himself in. I'm just wandering back down the paddock, guys. It's very busy here, very busy. People lingering as a lot of the freight is being packed away. I have to say, I think the teams are keen to get everything packed up and back in the lorries and onto the ships to head out of Australia. But yeah, it's a busy old paddock in here. Everyone's soaking up the atmosphere.
Yeah, and well, if I were you, I would be hanging out around the Ferrari end of the paddock, because that's where the real atmosphere is going to be.
Funny you say that, Harry. I am perfect. Right there. I am right there by the Ferrari garage.
Rosanna, I always remember, from my days of being in those pit lane garages at the end of a Grand Prix, obviously depending how your race result went, if you're Ferrari, you want to get the champagne out. You're not really interested in packing freight up right now. You want to celebrate this moment. If you're Mercedes, if you're further back, you cannot wait to get those boxes packed up, shut the doors down in your garage and get out of there. So there'll be different ends of the pit lane looking at what the massive task in front of them, because they do have to get this freight out of there at a rapid rate, but they'll be looking at it through very different coloured spectacles as the evening rolls on.
A lot of media trying to grab a word with Carlos Sainz Jr.'s father, Carlos Sainz Sr. He's having a chat with some of the German media. A big weekend for their family, because of course to go racing after having had major surgery, which I'm going to call having an appendix removed major surgery, that's a big thing to watch your son go into a Formula 1 car and put themselves through high G levels, through the stress of a race weekend, and for him to come out on the top step of the podium at the end of it all. What an emotional moment for the Sainz family.
Yeah, it really is. And they're so likeable. You can't help but like the Sainzes, and especially Carlos Sainz Jr., having to scrap around now for a seat next year, having been ousted through no fault of his own. But when a 7-time world champion comes on the market, fair play, you go and try and get him, don't you? But what's interesting is that Friday, Carlos Sainz was about 0.4, half a second off the top runners. Wasn't really there, but he was really bedding himself in. Then qualifying, came alive and was quicker than Leclerc, and was really providing some jeopardy for a pole position that wasn't going to go the way of Max Verstappen.
Go for it. I've got McLaren CEO Zak Brown. Well, congratulations on the podium. That was a really fun Australian Grand Prix. I think we all enjoyed it.
Yeah, it was good. It's good to be on the podium. Lando and Oscar drove great. Our pace was pretty strong. Not quite strong enough for the red guys, but it was close. It's encouraging.
And a tough call to switch the drivers, especially with the Australian fans here. Are you a bit worried for leaving the circuit this evening, Zach?
No, all will be good. Obviously, Oscar's a huge fan favorite, but they ended up being on different strategies because we responded to when Leclerc pitted. So Oscar was a little quicker at the start, and Lando's strategy was a little bit quicker the second half of the race. So that's just how it played out.
And what does this mean for the rest of the season and the upcoming races? Are you feeling confident about Japan and China?
Yeah, I think Japan will be strong. We were really strong in there last year. I think that circuit will suit our car. So, yeah, we're encouraged. First podium of the year, and pretty sure it won't be our last.
Well, enjoy the celebrations.
Thank you.
There we go. Zak Brown, CEO of McLaren. A big weekend for him, extending his tenure at the team, taking him right through to 2030. And what a way to kick that extension off with a podium. Their first podium of the year, as Zak said. And a difficult call, actually. Team orders coming into play. But as he mentioned, it was due to the strategies that the different drivers were on. But always tricky in front of a home crowd to tell the home hero to move over.
Yeah, but I think that's understandable. I mean, you say first podium of the year for McLaren, first podium in Melbourne for 10 years since Magnussen and Button. And Piastri...
All right, stat man.
I know. But also the one that got me, we saw Mark Webber, who is Oscar Piastri's manager, on the podium, handing over the trophy to the winning constructor. Piastri with that fourth finish, well, that's the best an Australian's ever done, it equals what the Australians have done around here with his manager Mark Webber and also Daniel Ricciardo as well. So a nice little Aussie stat, but they can't seem to get past that fourth place marker.
Do you think Oscar will go on the podium regardless? Do you think he'll go and have a little step up there and a photo, as is customary?
Yeah, why not? I mean, it is a really strong result for McLaren, isn't it? I mean, Ferrari have clearly had a very good day, but I think let's not take anything away from McLaren as well. That's a really strong result from them. And they've beaten the sister Red Bull fair and square. All right, Max was taken out of the picture, but they still had another Red Bull to beat, and they've done that convincingly.
And in terms of those four teams, the McLarens, the Ferraris, the Mercedes and the Aston Martins, are you starting to understand the pecking order a little more? Of course, Mercedes taking themselves out of contention with that power unit failure and George taking himself out by running into the wall.
I think, Rosanna, I'm not sure we've still seen the full pecking order yet. I think we're getting a hint of it clearly, but still, this is a circuit that's still not a kind of traditional racetrack. I think when we get to Japan next time out, perhaps China as well, we'll start to see an even clearer picture. We might see the first sets of upgrades coming for, or the next set of upgrades coming for some of these cars. People are starting to get a real understanding of how their cars behave, but that's a real traditional circuit, isn't it? Old school, fast, some really big corners, some iconic corners in there. We've seen some unbelievable racing there in the past. I think that might give us an even clearer picture than the one we've got right now.
And it's funny, isn't it, that we're heading to Japan next? That's normally positioned sort of October time in the calendar, being brought forward to April this time around. And it's funny to be bringing upgrades to Japan. We don't normally say that. It's normally the first European race in Barcelona, isn't it? But the teams are having to really rejig the logistics and their development race this year.
Yeah, it's a weird one, isn't it? And they've also got to think continually about the cost cap, and also China when we get there as well. That will be the first of the sprint races that we have this season. So that's another interesting one where they only get one practice session all of a sudden. So do you bother bringing an upgrade or not? So it's getting into a really interesting part of the season. It's Japan, China, then Miami, and then we get to the European round. Imola kicks things off the European season. I quite like this sort of start to the year, though, because they are all such different tracks. So we're going into each weekend not quite sure what that pecking order is going to be. But, I think it is fair to say at the moment it is Red Bull, Ferrari, and then McLaren.
Yeah, I agree with you, Harry. You're talking sense as I'm just watching Carlos Sainz, your race. Yeah, I'm enjoying it while it lasts. Carlos Sainz being walked through the paddock, and there's a boom overhead, and you might be able to guess who that is. That is, of course, the Netflix documentary makers following him. What a story. That's going to be an episode, surely, on Drive to Survive next time out.
Verstappen's downfall. That's the title. I can hear it, see it now.
Yeah. Where it all started to unravel for the three-time world champion. Oh, yes, absolutely. Well, we said that in Singapore, didn't we? We were all thinking last year, Singapore, suddenly there was a bogey track for Max Verstappen and Red Bull, and then of course he got it all back on track, and things were fine, weren't they? They were absolutely fine, I would say.
This is a blip, isn't it? If we're going to be really honest, this is a blip for Red Bull and for Max Verstappen. It was a technical error. As I just said before, I can't remember the last time I've seen Max Verstappen make a mistake, and he didn't do that again today. There was a technical problem with his car. So I think, we don't know what the result would have been, but we do know that if he'd remained in this race, he'd have absolutely been a contender, and there'd have been a real fight at the front for that win. I don't know whether Carlos would have been able to do it, but he would have absolutely had Max up there somewhere. So I suspect that to be the case next time out too.
Yeah, and some work to do for the Mercedes team. A really difficult DNF, a double DNF for them. They're going to want to bounce back strongly in Japan, a circuit that Lewis Hamilton loves.
Yeah, absolutely. He's really going to want to try and bounce back, but high-speed corners will continue to be the issue, though, for them.
Well, just a recap on your top 10 then. It was Carlos Sainz who won down under the Australian Grand Prix, going to the Spanish driver ahead of his teammate Charles Leclerc. A Ferrari 1-2 ahead of Lando Norris in the McLaren. Then it was a home hero, Oscar Piastri, ahead of Sergio Perez, unable to capitalise when his teammate was out. Fernando Alonso P6 ahead of his teammate Lance Stroll. Then Yuki Tsunoda, Nico Hülkenberg and Kevin Magnussen rounding out the points. My thanks to Mark Priestley and Harry Benjamin, who talked us through the last 58 laps of the Australian Grand Prix. I've been Rosanna Tennant. Coming up from 7 a.m, it's Sunday Breakfast with Chris Warburton and Eddie Allroyd. And this has been an IMG production for BBC Radio 5 Live. Next, it's 5 Live Science.